On today's episode, we're talking about maturity, subspace, and you. So, one of our favorite video essayists, Leadhead, came out with a video recently talking about puppy space, puppy girl, from the puppy girl perspective specifically, and was talking about it from a sort of theory and perspective. Um, and talked about the positives and the negatives of that experience and a little bit how she herself has navigated them, because it's easy to be so wrapped up in like a sub headspace. I'll say a sub headspace. She's talking about puppy space specifically. Pet play is also like in this conversation as well. The same thing happens with little space, and that's actually what we have more experience with, or just like a more typical, or a not, or subspaces that aren't tied to a role that's so explicit. Because even someone who's getting like spanked can experience subspace, right? So even though the kind of subspace someone might experience might be different, it's still subspace. And I think that by looking at it specifically from a Ethereum perspective and not and kind of leaving the kink perspective to the side, I think that there was a little bit lost in a more well-rounded conversation of these topics. I'm mentioning we've added maturity to the topic for our discussion because we don't want to just talk about subspace and how to manage it. That's fucking boring. um, Although we will talk about some things that folks should know, especially in terms of if you are submissive and you do seek to do like scenes and stuff with people, or have like, I know amongst like babs and like pets alike, there is for a lot of people a fantasy of someone who will take care of you so you don't have to work, and they treat you as a pet or as a kiddo or whatever, and you don't have to have any adult responsibilities. And on the internet, especially with millennials and Gen Z, and I'm sure Gen Alpha eventually, there is a there is a big pressure that you have to relieve, even with previous topics that we've talked about in terms of like, say, queer people and how different our ways of navigating stages of life are a lot different than straight cis people. There's still just like a societal shift in more recent generations in terms of what it means to be an adult, and to more recent generations, including millennials, benefit. It is nice that a lot of people aren't automatically considered to be childish for watching cartoons or animation in general. That animation is seen as, and still has a ways to go, unfortunately, of being seen as good as live action, and you know can tell stories and not just kid stories. And like being into video games is now much more accepted. It's much more casual. There are a lot of things that are linked to childhood that generations more recently have more access to and don't have as much negative emotional baggage about that older generations might have. Even just the response to like leisure and talking about like a shorter work week and all these things wraps itself back up into this image of the adult, and challenging that image of the adult through uh well, for a lot of people, through hobbyism. But we want to push that further. We've talked about it before, how like having a childlike mindset and being more open to more wondrous ways of thinking can be useful for leftists and can be useful for resisting the things that society teaches us that we that we want to unlearn generally, especially as anarchists. Um, and that's cool. Like a lot of stuff that people are into now that wouldn't necessarily that isn't necessarily kind of age play will have seen much more juvenile or like kid adjacent, like even like 20 years ago. So so there is that. But even with like more access to leisure and stuff, there are a lot of people getting into kink not for the sexual gratification. They're getting into kink for the ability to offload all that fucking stress you get for having to adult. And as much as there's some people who don't like the term adulting and are just like, can we just integrate the ways we want to be with what it means to be an adult so like we don't need to have a verb for it or whatever? And I can see those people's point, but we felt for a while that adulting being a thing you do as opposed an adult being a thing you are outside of, the physical constraints of like what it means to be an adult because like technically scientifically you don't stop growing until you're 26 and there's a lot of nuances with how people who are young but not minors are treated because even someone who's like 21 is going to get infantilized in society. So amongst all these things, the rise of puppy girls or the popularization of littles or the popularization of any sort of kink or power exchange dynamics that allow for at least one party to not have to be responsible, not have to think about the doom and gloom of the world is a much as an increasing concept. Something that Leadhead really was is that at the core of her video is talking about how she had struggled with being puppy, like retreating into puppy when she needed to be a human. Um, and also being reminded by her partner and recognizing that even with how great it is to be in that like altered headspace, that if something goes wrong, like your consent is important, and also like you're not freed from consequences. You know, like I'm baby or I was in pup mode can only go so far, and it's okay for those to be limits. Actually, in our own dynamics, uh, our framework is roles stacking on top of each other, kind of like Legos, instead of sliding one out for the other, like switching, not switching in the normal like being able to be attuned to both roles sort of way, but more instead of switching from one like from an adult role to a little role or a pet role to a non-pet role, we like think of it like a layer cake, and we have access to those things at once. And that's also kind of related to that thing that Scribble coined. What was it? Latchkey littles, i.e., littles that can adult but are still in little space. They get to take a certain amount of responsibility that reflects being like a latchkey kid. And especially if you grew up with a certain amount of trauma, we think that or not even trauma, if you grew up having to be responsible at a young age and you're more likely to be a latchkey kid, we think that it's more likely for someone's little or middle space to look more like that. Though someone's little space doesn't always look like how they live their life when they were a bio kid, of course. Um, and so, like, for example, like, if we're asking for our partner for money, even though it is a serious thing, we might ask, hey, can I get my allowance? And it's like, it's the dual things at once. And, like, I think that's important for live in play or, like, like constant play. And something that we, in our last, like, live in relationship, we didn't fully master. I think we're in a good place with it now, but no one ever stops growing. Um, Yeah, we have a lot to say about this topic, actually. I said all that, and I haven't read anything that we have set up for today. Let me catch him on chat. Invention ideas, dog whistle, petting machine. Oh, sorry. Invention ideas. A dog petting machine so your dog doesn't get lonely, or better yet, a me petting machine so I don't get lonely. That's cute. The creature is a titan. I'll say now, Titan like a old school like Greek Titans, or do you mean like Attack on Titan? And I actually haven't peed yet, so if you're smelling pee, that ain't me. Titan's name is Enfrenzy, an anthropomorphic deer. You got my attention with a deer. Anthropomorphic deer with 4 arms and a scaled tail that throws Sinbon the size of redwood trees, with canines pointed outward like a traditional Oni mask. Sick. There are lanterns tied in between its antlers, and they're silent with fast movement. I see. We might draw that later. Sick. So anyway, the reason why we also want to talk about maturity, and unfortunately, and also excitingly, we couldn't find much on the internet in a cursory glance over the last few days, looking for stuff related to maturity and like kink dynamics or dynamics that would include someone like you know giving up some of their autonomy or power exchange, as it is generally called. And I was thinking about this because coming from a little perspective, as opposed to a exclusively like pet play ish perspective, it is it has been interesting, and we were hoping that other people had maybe tried to look at this intersection, because there's this certain thing that we've been experiencing and seeing other people in the in the age play space talk about every now and then, but I don't think it ever goes into like too detailed a place. People will talk about how being a little is like just normal for them, and this includes us, right? um like we generally don't feel like a quote unquote adult, or we don't generally feel like our age necessarily. Now, how much that's related to trauma, how much that is more like an identity thing, um, is a blurry line. And some people explicitly, like psychologically, experience age sliding, and generally headmates might be different ages in a plural system, right? So there's a lot of vectors for like mental age to be played around with without it ever even starting out as a dynamic. But when you're doing, I guess when you are like conscious of like the basically that I like living my life this way, I'm happier this way, and those in those ways that just aren't disruptive to society too much, but still aren't normal. Even something as simple as wearing a collar. If you like, we know people who like do collaring ceremonies. We hope to do one soonish, where like very much like putting like wedding rings on during a wedding ceremony, like the top putting the collar of their submissive on their submissive, and it like being a ceremony to symbolize like like I own you and that sort of thing. And that's very special. And I think that it's very easy to fall into dynamics that give that much euphoria. But I think something that we have seldom fell into in dynamics is completely wanting to like get rid of all autonomy, like being treated like an actual baby, or being treated like an actual pet and not like doing anything, or just like literally walking around the house like a fucking house cat, like that sort of stuff. Like a day maybe, but like for our entire lives it would not be fun. There's a anime movie actually called Whisker Away that actually explores that idea. If you could be your partner's cat, would you actually enjoy it, or would you get tired of it, kind of sort of thing. Um, yeah, those are a lot of words I just said. How I think that intersects with maturity is the sense of someone wanting to not have to participate in society, obviously, right? But I think this would be especially prevalent amongst disabled folk because disabled folks like us also have to worry about falling into learned helplessness, like in general, with relying on people, right? And so when you stack on like trying to have a functional dynamic, especially like a consistent dynamic, I think that there's a lot of there can be a lot of coping there, but you can also use dynamics like that to like retreat into yourself. Like some people very actually want to be someone's pet, and I don't think that that in and of itself is necessarily bad, but I think that it's hard for me not to think it irresponsible to do power change and never take that power back a little bit, especially if it means taking care of someone. And that's also why I think the like layering of roles instead of a strict separation of them can be useful, because with our framework we don't have to quote unquote turn it off necessarily. But that takes a lot of practice and a lot of living in situations. And also, being in subspace or being in an altered headspace does affect your cognition. And that's also something to think about. And a lot of people I've seen talk about online the altered headspaces, and there is truth in the psychology of alter headspaces being an actual alter headspace, you being more agreeable in that headspace, easier to manipulate, wanting to please more, and that being a way that someone can like take advantage of you, for example. But on top of that, I think that there's a real risk to just not want to be a person and just retreat into the role. And I think that having a sort of cohesion, like the fusion of the animus and anima, in a way, I think is a really cool way to integrate that subspace or whatever sub version of yourself you feel is very accurate for like how you want to identify and be, especially in a relationship. And actually not making your partner or dominant like do all the hard stuff and never like helping out, because like we said, you can reframe things so you don't have to always come all the way out of the role. And I mean, as much as people get shit for public play that doesn't involve others, I think it is valid, especially in the context of something that no one else can tell. Like like having someone have like bondage gear on under their clothes and you go out and do stuff. Like I think that that's fine, generally, but you need to have the ability to like hold yourself together a little bit, Like for example, if you had a partner and you had like a vibrator on them, you had like a remote control vibrator and you're controlling it, like testing it out and making sure that they can handle it and they're not just gonna fall to their knees and yell, "I'm coming!" in the middle of Walgreens is important. Not that I know that from personal experience. That has never happened to me, I swear. I I'm glad we're in agreement. Okay, so let me talk about the context through some of this reading we got here. So went ground zero, maturity, just maturity, psychological. So Wikipedia is the equivalent on the internet of going to the dictionary. In psychology, maturity can be operated. can operationally be defined as a level of psychological functioning measured through standards like the Worcester intelligence scale for children one can attain, after which the level of psychological functioning no longer increases much with age. However, beyond this, integration is also an aspect of maturation, such as the integration of personality, where the behavioral patterns, motives, and other traits of a person are gradually brought together to work together effectively with little to no conflict between them as an organized whole, bringing a person's various motives together into a purpose in life. Case in point, adult development and maturity theories include the purpose in life concept, in which maturity emphasizes a clear comprehension of life's purpose, directness, and intentionality, which contributes to the feeling that life is meaningful. See, I got problems with this already because, like, I hate to go under capitalism. How are you expected to feel like you're living a life worth meaning when you're alienated from your labor, when even something as simple as water or being able to get medical treatment is technically a luxury, and so many other things, let alone like the soul, like being able to or having to navigate the world socially, you know? It's it feels shitty because I am disabled and I know disabled people who, depending on the framework you're using to establish what is an adult and what is not, I know people who wouldn't count. I wouldn't count. Shit, some of y'all watching probably wouldn't count, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be in control of yourself or your own fate. And that's also why I don't know if folks have ever noticed this before, but a lot of times when someone in chat tells us like, "Oh, you shouldn't curse. You're having a potty mouth. You're too little to curse." We usually, in some way, stand our ground on it and don't fall into that part of any sort of teasing dynamic. Um, Maybe it's because when we were actually a kid, we were told that like it wasn't right for us to cuss, and even when we were like old enough that people shouldn't be able to tell us to not curse, people older than us still told us that we were just like too much of a goody two shoes to curse. Basically, you know how people call like Captain America a Boy Scout? That's sort of infantilizing him, don't you think? At least that's what I think. We were never a boy or a girl scout, unfortunately. But my point is, even in little space, we will tell someone to fuck off and I will curse how I want. Which also can be part of little space because it's just like, yeah, my dad doesn't care if I curse. Or something like that, you know? Um you can take control within the context, you know? And I think that that's important, especially for folks who, and I know a lot of people in my community are disabled and are dependent on someone or someone's or live at home and have not been independent because of trauma, because of disability, and because of having people in their life that are willing to, at the very least, let them stay with them, um, and like coexist. And the median age for adults living with their parents is like higher than ever. The amount of adults that live alone, just in terms of like what's the word, like financial stability, is like really low. Like shit, we have two roommates. I mean, one of them we're in a relationship with, yeah, but like a lot of people can't exist completely dependently, and that's okay. And I want to encourage people to recognize that they can have autonomy and they can exercise it and they should, and to not to fall into learned helplessness as easily, or at least push back against it, because learned helplessness can be really sucky, and especially if like the caregivers in your life or the people who let you stay with them or do whatever, even if they're not necessarily a parent, someone who has that power over you, like I recognize that is a power dynamic, but you should also recognize that you're not just literally a child to them, I guess. And I think that that goes even into role play dynamics, because we've even known people to get abused in role play dynamics, in a thing where Dom doesn't want to give the power back and makes it so that the sub can't easily be independent. And I don't want to scare anyone who hasn't gone into like any sort of kink dynamics, because you can get abused in a vanilla relationship just as easily. But it is good to like have your bearings, and I think that the fact that kinks can so easily have this Venn diagram effect on different experiences, and can like strengthen your wisdom across them, like as a disabled person who also does stuff in kink. Like, I think it's really important to have these conversations in conjunction. One of the wonders of age play is, as a big, is giving your little chores. I had a lifestyle little, and they were at least a low tier little space a lot of the time, but they still contributed to the household because they had their chores. Those chores got to be part of their safe space rather than an imposition on their mental resources. That is so cool. Fair song. Thank you for adding that to the conversation. Like, that's super nice to hear. Um, we don't have that strict a framework, but we do have a sort of guardrails sort of thing, especially because until we make a like a decent amount from our content creation, we can't actively like monetarily contribute to our household. But like, we make sure that we at least try to wash the dishes regularly. But even with the chores and the stuff we do around the house, if we slack on them, and oftentimes we do, it's usually because of mental health. We also don't believe laziness exists, so there's that. And having that sense of responsibility, like, we kind of have that internal framework of, oh yeah, I gotta do my chores. Like, if someone like if someone just messaged us on Discord and was like, oh, like, what were you doing today, and we had washed the dishes, I would say, oh yeah, we were doing chores. Like, it's just a useful framework for us as well. If you don't know from experience, then why'd you say Walgreens specifically? Shut up! It's just a place. It's the first place that came to mind. Potty mouths are valid. I love having a potty mouth. The status of maturity is distinguished by the shift away from a reliance on guardianship and the oversight of an adult in decision making acts. Maturity has different definitions across legal, social, religious, political, sexual, emotional, and intellectual contexts. The age or qualities assigned for each of these contexts are tied to culturally significant indicators of independence that often vary as a result of social sentiments. The concept of psychological maturity has implications across both legal and social contexts, while a combination of political activism and scientific evidence continue to reshape and qualify its definition. Because of these factors, the notion and definition of maturity and immaturity is somewhat subjective. I like this article so far, especially in talking about going across both legal and social contexts. Every time we talk about like the rights of autistic people, it usually comes up because it's one of the things we're most mad about in terms of how autistic people are treated legally. If you're autistic, in some states you can't get married because the state doesn't think that you're allowed to consent enough to get married. So yeah, I guess we're never getting an autism diagnosis, even if we never get married again. Because I don't want that. Fuck that shit. Oh, also, if you're diagnosed as autistic, immigrating to any other country, especially another first world country, is extremely difficult. So there's also that. So there is a lot of activism involved in this sort of stuff, because people quantifying someone's psychological maturity as insufficient, because especially of like mental illness or trauma, is very rampant as a form of legal abuse. The most well-known case of this, at least in recent years, or in like the modern popular consciousness, would be Britney Spears. Like, having a conservatorship, having someone be your legal guardian or whatever, in that sense, like that they can override your like legal autonomy is like really scary. And a lot of people abuse that. American psychologist Jerome Berner proposed the purpose of the period of immaturity as being a time for experimental play without serious consequences, where a young animal can spend a great deal of time observing the actions of skilled others in coordination with oversight by and activity with its mother. The key to human innovation through the use of symbols and tools, therefore, is to a reinterpretive limitation that is practiced, perfected, and varied in play through extensive exploration of the limits to one's ability to interact with the world. Evolutionary psychologists have also hypothesized that cognitive immaturity may serve as an adaptive purpose as a protector barrier for children against their own underdeveloped metacognition and judgment, a vulnerability that may put them in harm's way. For youth today, the steadily extending period of play and schooling going into the 21st century comes as a result of the increasing complexity of our world and its technologies, which to demand an increasingly intrinsicality of skill as well as a more exhaustive set of prerequisite abilities. Many of the behavioral and emotional problems associated with adolescence may arise as children cope with the increasing demand placed upon them, demands which have increasingly abstracted from the work and the expectations of adulthood. That's also something that I think of. I mean, even before we growing up, we had a computer in our home. There was a lot of pressure on us, especially as a minority. And we've mentioned it before that we were raised by like a black radical. At least one person was a black radical, but one was a lawyer, and our other parent was a cop. Oh boy, that was, and they're both black. It's just like holy shit, and probably closetly lesbians. Whoo boy, there's a lot of self hate there, and a lot of fucked up shit. Um, but I mention it in the way of like there's this weird tension, especially because we were autistic, because we were raised as a boy. There was the early on when adolescence hit, there was a shift in the cognition of our parents of seeing us not as a boy, but like as a man or as male and as like more dangerous, and that fucked us up. But uh, I think that the amount of stuff that we were pressured to be able to do was always a disappointment to our parents, at least like emotionally. And that experience also flies in the face of what a lot of people say of like if your IQ is a certain low score, you shouldn't be allowed to participate in society. Or like you should be, considered a certain type of disabled and like you need a caretaker or something, or you can't make your own decisions. I when we were growing up, we were called like street stupid and book smart. When really we had applied knowledge in like scholarly pursuits, and we can hold information. We're very interested in information, but things like that are assumed to be like common sense, and just general like social standards and reasoning, because we're autistic, especially, was really really skewed. And it's not uncommon for autistic people to come off as naive and even to have their development be slower in some ways than others. Sometimes people will catch autism early when a child doesn't meet certain milestones, like potty training late, or not speaking until like later than normal, and that sort of thing. And honestly, over the like the centuries, what's expected of a human, like a young human, has like had a weird shift, because I think socially people consider children to be like in this space where, reflecting even what this Wikipedia article is saying, like it's a time for experimentation, and like, like you should be able to like be free and like not have to worry about the burdens of stuff. But like, especially if you even if you're this is one of the few times I'll give credit to like, you know white heteronormative people. If you're poor, you're gonna have to grow up faster than people who are not, you know like there are just certain things that you learn early, and there were certain things that we learned hella late. But like we basically learned what we needed to at the time that we needed to, or we were like basically being dragged behind a truck, you know? And like certain milestones we had to run towards, but we didn't meet them in a comfortable way, so we never like latched on correctly. So even with insufficient skills in some areas that are seen as intrinsic to adulthood, I don't think that that means that we lack the ability to consent or to like manage our own shit, even if we do need accommodations. And I think that that's something hard for a lot of able-bodied or quote unquote able-minded people to like consider because, well, the overlap between being like neurodivergent and in some way childlike is really strong, and people automatically will infantilize people based on their physical or mental or emotional ability, just like based on age, and it sucks. Funny enough, Punk, I relate high to you. I don't think that that's I don't think that that's really that surprising though. We have a lot in common in that way. I think you tend to come off as less childlike than we do, but that's also like I don't know if it's connected to how much we're cartoon animals or not. A part of why I'm not married to my fiance yet is because I am unused marriageability might be necessary to get an American out of their country in the near future. Yes, yes, that does like this. Like, hey, if you think you have like a neurodivergence or a mental illness and you want to get it diagnosed, if you think that you're gonna want to flee America, you might want to wait until after. And that's the dystopia we live in. Socioeconomic and cognitive markers. Also, this is the last section I'm reading of this. But if you, oh, I might actually read part of problems with alleged negative correlation between plasticity and critical thinking. These actually have some interesting thingies. We might actually read more of this than I thought. Let's see. This is the part that we were especially interested in. Socio emotional and cognitive markers. Although psychological maturity is specifically grounded in the autonomy of one's decision making ability, these outcomes are deeply embedded in not only cognition, but also in lifelong process of emotional, social, and moral development. Various theorists have provided frameworks for recognizing the indicators of maturity. Atkinson's stages of psychosocial development describe progression from adult to into adult maturity, with each metronational stage characterized by a certain kind of psychosocial conflict. The identity stage is characterized as being mainly having concerns with issues of role exploration and role confusion, and also the exploration of sexual and other identities. Adolescents navigate a web of conflicting values and selves in order to emerge as the person who has come to be and the person society expects one to become. Erickson did not insist that stages begin and end at globally predefined points, but the particular stages, such as identity, could extend into adulthood for as long as it took to resolve the conflict. I think that that's really good. Oh gosh, thank you, historical psychologists. Sometimes you actually hit it right. Um, because I want to show. There's not a big part of this one we want to show you. But looking at the setup, you might actually recognize this if you're into Evangelion because I talk about like the oral stage or whatever. Hope, trust versus mistrust, will, autonomy versus shame and doubt, purpose, initiative versus guilt, competence, industry versus inferiority, fidelity, identity versus role confusion. Now, this one is from 11 to 19 years, and I can tell you that even quote unquote normal adults will struggle for their entire lives with identity versus role confusion. So I feel weird about the categorization, and I would say that to say someone hasn't fully developed in their maturity may be framework correct, but I do think is sort of insulting. I don't like it. The amount of you should be reliant on knowing you are a man, and you should stop focusing on your YouTube and arts and should get into a trade or join the army. Oh gosh, I see. For fuck's sake, how the hell am I expected to get the financial independence already? Shit, people who do that stuff don't always even get financial independence. Like legit, a lot of people into the military get fucked over. Like GI bills and stuff, like money that you get for being a veteran, like it just like like college grants and stuff, how when the grant runs out of money, they don't acquisition more money, it's just gone, and anyone who didn't get it is fucked. And in that same way, historically, veterans have gotten fucked, especially in not being supported, in like the trauma that they will inevitably get in most situations in the military if you have any combat experience. Honestly, even if you don't, because there's abuse that runs rampant in the military, especially if you're in any way a minority. But that's beside the point. Yes, like the pressure to like grow up already is like definitely like strong. Actually, weirdly, when we were growing up, our parents were very disappointed in our emotional development, but like our intellectual development, they took as a point of pride. Like probably to a fault, and they could not reconcile us being able to like get good grades and know what the digestive system was at 12 years old versus why we had like such low uh like rejection and disappointment tolerance. Like they would brag about how like clever we were and stuff to their friends, but then they would be mean to us, and then we would start crying, and they would, and I think that probably is like one of the like principal pillars of what led to us like being so attracted to stuff like age play and stuff like that in that sense, because we have always felt like at odds, we've always felt at conflict with the sense of maturity of what we could intellectually handle versus what we could like emotionally handle, and a lot of that is actually because of trauma. It's ridiculous how much of that is because of trauma. um but that doesn't mean you can't be an adult or responsible. But a lot of people do assume that emotional resilience means that you are like stronger or more adult. And especially in the black community, like being like emotionally soft, regardless of gender, honestly, is looked down upon like incredibly much. It's ridiculous. And like the pressure to get independent already, especially if you're AMAB, whoo gosh, I don't wish that on anyone. I've been told I'm the type of little who would flush your keys down the toilet and super glue the furniture to the ceiling if you leave me unattended for 5 minutes. Well, I trust you to not flush my keys down the toilet, but that's only because they're attached to my wallet. Uh, the only thing we ever flushed down the toilet when we were younger were cigarettes, actually. Existential question: who am I, and what can I be? I'm actually interested more in here, but I wanted to mention identity and role confusion thing being like a big deal that I think for most people in the modern age, especially like in America or something. Not to say that America is the center of the universe, just the center of mine. Is like, especially for someone who is disabled or queer, is like generally you're not getting that. I mean, technically, some of this we didn't get until like we were like, I don't know, like 28. Like I think our body makes 32 this year, and it's weird. It's weird, and like you know, we're still getting to life stages late, and that's okay. Um, but I was interested in reading this one. Can I love? That's interesting because love is something that happens way younger, I would say. By the time we were 20, we had like loved deeply someone who was not a family member, like probably at least 10 people. And I'm not just meaning romantic love either. I think that like platonic love is important too, just as important actually. The intimacy versus isolation conflict occurs following adolescence. At the start of this stage, identity versus role confusion is coming to an end, although it still lingers at the foundation of the stage. The stage doesn't always involve a romantic relationship, but includes a strong bonds with others being formed. Young adults are still eager to blend their identities with those of their friends because they want to fit in. Erickson believes that people are sometimes isolated due to intimacy. People are afraid of rejections, such as being turned down or their partners breaking up with them. Human beings are familiar with pain, and to some people, rejection is so painful that their egos cannot bear it. Heart relate. This distinction is the desire to isolate or destroy things that may be dangerous to one's own ideals or life. This can occur if a person has their intimate relationship invaded by outsiders. Oh, we definitely dealt with some of that actually, but actually much younger. Weird how it's like not a straight a development isn't a straight line. Once people have established their identities, they're ready to make long-term commitments to others. They become capable of forming intimate, reciprocal relationships, though close friendships or through close friendships or marriage, and willingly make the sacrifices and compromises that such relationships require. Those in more advanced stages of identity development are often associated with greater success pertaining to intimacy formation. If people cannot form these intimate relationships, perhaps because of their own needs, then a sense of isolation may result, thereby arousing feelings of darkness and angst. As someone with BPD specifically, this is a big thing because, like, actually being able to have any relationships last is, like, really important. And someone who has not had luck with managing their BPD will get into this very can is at risk of getting into a very shitty cycle where, because there's so few relationships you can hold on to, the few ones you do you hold on to for dear life. So sometimes you squeeze too hard and there's like codependence, and that can become a very toxic thing. Or you feel that even without someone telling you that you're in you recognize you're when you recognize you're in an abusive situation, if it's one of the people who hasn't given up on you and you know for a really long time, then you're gonna be more willing to like take like humiliation, abuse, and disrespect, because I might not get another friend or partner like this, and that sort of fear of isolation can really drive some really desperate dynamics. And that we definitely have experienced firsthand. Eggeson's documentation of his theory spends time considering intimacy between two people. The main conflict is whether an individual is willing to give themselves up to someone else. As suggested in the previous paragraphs, it seems that it could be very valuable for someone at this stage to let go of some of their fears in order to gain a solid relationship with another person. We experienced that. Like, honestly, getting used to like actually like I guess, for lack of a better word, like confessing to people, was like a big deal. And we actually, like, through our life, have generally been the person to ask the other person out, right? But it's definitely something that we generally did not like. And maybe it's also because of that being tied to gender expectations. But honestly, at this stage, I think we're okay with it. Erickson discusses the differences of his theory as compared to Freud's theory of psychosexual development. Freud tended to focus more on sexual gratification without deep personal relationships being involved. I think that is definitely a weakness on Freud's part. Erickson's proposal suggests that there is more to intimacy than sexual gratification. Duh! There is value in the deep bonds that can be shared between two people socially. It is worth noting that Erickson, in his writing, does still discuss and see the value of sexual relations within a socially intimate relationship. Yeah, don't leave it all on the cutting room floor. It's just that one thing isn't intrinsically more valuable than the other. Okay, so that was that one. Socioeconomical emotional markers. While maturity is often termed as a label awarded to a child, research has revealed that children themselves hold a clear sense of their own autonomy and personal jurisdiction. For example, American elementary age school children demonstrated acknowledgement of the limits of their parents' authority over their choices of dress, hairstyle, friends, hobbies, and media choices. Shit, when we were as young as 13, like we would stay out all times of night, and you know the sort of stereotype of a kid doing that growing up is someone who's like in a gang or like getting up to trouble. We're playing, hanging around with our friends, playing Yu-Gi-Oh. Like, I mean, sometimes getting into some etchy stuff, but more than likely just like socially charging together or like in some way bonding or trying to, you know. And for a long time, our parents just couldn't do anything about it because they had given us the independence because they couldn't like fucking pick us up from school all the time, especially when we started going to school downtown. Whereas we lived on the south side, and only one of our parents had a car, and they were always fighting. Wait, this isn't a trauma dump, I swear. I swear, I swear. Uh, my point is that even though we were considered a goody two shoes, we did disobey our parents quite frequently. Like calculating how much we could get away with. We literally did that. And of course, you know, even something as simple as sneakily watching, like an R-rated movie when your parents are asleep or out of town or something is just as valid as an example, you know. But this constrained earlier concept of personal autonomy later develops into a broader understanding of individual freedoms, with an understanding of freedom of speech as a universal right emerging by elementary school age. However, younger children do have difficulty with maintaining a consistent view on universal rights, with 75% of first grade children expressing uncertainty about prohibiting freedom of speech in Canada. But the same study also found that 6 to 11-year-old Canadian children rejected non democratic systems on the basis of violating principles of majority vote, equal representation, and the right to vote, which provides evidence for an emerging knowledge of political decision making skills from a young age. Maybe we should lower the voting age. Maybe just like 16 at first. Uh, and I said voting age, just the voting age. But like it's so interesting because there's so many ways that when you're growing up as a kid you get like infantilized and people are like you can't da 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 da. Like for example, like we dye hair all the time now, and growing up we were told by our parents uh that they don't want us to dye our hair for two reasons, because that's gay, and then also like you're not responsible enough for some shit like that, and it's like I have the cognitive ability to take care of this thing, though they saw it as a flaw of character that we couldn't upkeep certain things, but that was because of like executive dysfunction, which they would not acknowledge. So like that's a weird thing. As a disabled person, even if your disabilities aren't being recognized, you're still disabled. And I think that's an interesting vector of that affecting how mature you seem to others. Like, especially in terms of, like, quote unquote, being lazy. If you just don't have a lot of executive function, if you have enough. Oh, shit. I think I just realized why we sucked at homework growing up. We used up all of our executive functioning during the day going to school, and then we had used it all up, and we didn't have enough functioning to finish to do our homework. Huh? Weird. That's super cool. Um, that brings up another place I've experienced infantilization as an ace. Fellow ACs, because I don't have sexual interests. I don't count as an adult. Oh, that's one of the main reasons that ace people get infantilized. That's like you haven't reached like the sexual stage of maturation. Like that's a we're more gray or demi. So like we do like sexual things, but we don't generally experience sexual attraction unless we have a bond with the person. So like there was a disconnect with us growing up. Like I remember like as a maybe like a junior in high school, one of our friends was like pointing out women on the street to us. I know, misogynist, right? And being like, "Hey, is that lady hot?" Because he had started getting real. He started trying to figure out what my type was, and like even people that I liked, like that had crushes on. Like he tried to find girls who looked like that, and it's like, so this girl's hot to you? They look like this person. It's like, but they're not that person. And it was such a weird thing, and along with our naivete in certain directions, it definitely came off to some people as we just didn't have sexual interests yet, or like we didn't know what sex was or what sexy was, like we couldn't recognize it or something, which is also funny. So I wanted to go to problem. Oh, this one was short. Problems with the alleged negative correlation between plasticity and critical thinking. One problem with the notion of mental maturity as an adults being both more critical and less plastic than children is that it assumes a negative correlation between plasticity and independent critical thinking. This assumption is criticized as the ability to clearly distinguish ideas from each other and critically amass them, would increase the capacity of self correction and not decrease it, making the correlation between plasticity and independent critical thinking positive and not negative. That makes me want to read the evolutionary markers part, but I don't want to belabor this too much. So I think I'll try to do the legal and political issues and see where that goes. I'm demi romantic, but I have the sex drive of a goddamn succubus. Yeah, sometimes it be like that. Ever since we got on HRT, well, I shouldn't say ever since. Maybe like 5 years in HRT, we felt like we leveled out in terms of like our hormonal sex urges. But we do get in heat like once a month or whatever. The definition and determination of maturity has been applied to the issue of criminal responsibility of juvenile offenders and a number of legal ages. The age of majority. Oh, this is such a weird one to us because, of course, black people are more likely to be tried as adults as opposed to white people, like as minors. Like someone is up like as young as 8 has been tried as an adult before because of the assumption, the racist assumption that black people like grow up faster. There is truth in survival stuff, and like if you're black, you're more likely to be impoverished, obviously, and if you're impoverished, like gonna have less resources, and you'll be forced to develop independence sooner. But independence and maturity are not the exact same thing. They definitely correlate, but like I said before, we knew how to take the bus, but we didn't know how to deal with like gosh, I can't even finish that sentence. We had emotional maturity, but not well. Sorry, we didn't have emotional maturity, but we had like intellectual maturity. Leave it at that. The age of majority, the most broadly applied legal threshold of adulthood, is typically characterized by recognition of control over oneself and one's actions and decisions. The most common age threshold is 18 years of age, with thresholds ranging from 14 to 21 across nations and between provinces. Although the age of majority is referred to as a jurisdiction's legal age, the legal ages of various other issues of legal maturity, like sexual consent or drinking and smoking ages, are often different from the age of majority. Aside from age based thresholds for maturity, restrictions based on the perceived intellectual immaturity also extend to those with a variety of mental impairments, generally defined as anyone with a mental disability that requires guardianship. With laws in place in most regions limiting the voting rights of the mentally disabled and often requiring the judgment of a court to declare fitness. Hate that. Hate that. Similar to those restrictions placed on children, persons with mental disabilities have also have freedoms restricted and have their rights assigned to parental guardians. Yeah, we're not free until we're all free. One reason cited for why children and the mentally disabled are not permitted to vote in elections is that they are too intellectually immature to understand voting issues. This view is echoed in concerns about the adult voting population, with observers citing concern for a decrease in civic virtue and social capital. Honestly, we live in a very ageist society, and honestly, it feels like the voting age is such that you will be indoctrinated enough to vote with the people that quote unquote are your tribe, i.e., whatever you grew up with. Which we think also relates to like youth liberation or anarchism in general, because folks that are less indoctrinated than others have a higher ability to resist and like recognize things. For example, with the college protests, there were articles talking about how if the students really wanted to create change, they would finish getting their degrees and go off and fucking become like CEOs and work in like Israeli relations and stuff. Essentially telling them to get to basically grow up, and if you want to change things, just become a wage slave and tie it to your financial security and become a pawn. And I'm just like, ew. Congratulations on getting close to your target weight, Majora. We should work out more. I say after we worked out really hard today. Not on purpose, but we did. Imagine people voting in elections that don't understand voting issues. That would be so weird. With observers citing concern for decrease in civic virtue and social capital, reflecting a generalized panic over the political intelligence of the voting population. Which is really funny because younger people are more politically aware than ever before, especially because of the internet. And people keep trying to take it away everybody's rights. Although critics have cited youth culture as contributing to the malaise of modern mass media's shallow treatment of political issues, interviews with youth themselves about their political views have revealed a widespread sense of frustration in their political powerlessness, as well as a strongly cynical view of actions of politicians. Wait, no, actually, scratch that. Voting age 12. I was thinking about that ever since I said 16. I was like, that's not radical enough. Interviews with youth themselves about their political views have revealed a widespread sense of frustration in their political powerlessness, as well as a strongly cynical view of the actions of politicians. Several researchers have attempted to explain this sense of cynicism as a way of rationalizing the sense of alienation and legal exclusion of youth in political decision making. Yeah, they won't let anyone under the age of 18 like have a hand in decision making or even choosing who gets to make the decisions, but they are often the people that are cited as what the decisions are about. Gotta protect those children. Appropriate voting age should be about the top 20th percentile, after which you are too old to vote. I don't think that there should be a too old to vote necessarily. I don't know. I don't like that either. I feel like that's ageist in the other direction. Like how a lot of people were oh, like boomers ruin the world, and it's like specific rich boomers ruin the world. There are boomers who are our comrades. It's just the ones that aren't are really, really fucking loud. I think that's a little cynical. Oh, really? I know it'd be bad, but I'd let the state give me a shit apartment if they gave me a shit allowance so I can just work on art alone. Tool to run, maybe. No, and then that'll dip into like disability rights immediately. What about people who can't walk already? What if you get a degenerative condition? Like, there's too many what ifs. I don't like being able to vote being tied to physical ability. I mean, like, Stephen Hawking should be allowed to vote. I mean, if he was still alive. Christopher Reeve should be alive. He's not alive either. Rar. Too old to run for office, I mean. They haven't actually put an age limit, at least not in the United States. People were making jokes about a certain senator who had died, like I think either like late last year, early this year. People were talking about how she was gonna come back, like with her soul sealed to a suit of armor, like in Full Metal Alchemist, because she was literally voting on the House floor like days before she died. And a lot of people in government are very, very old. This is true. So maybe we can return to the conversation after there's an established you're too old, because I mean Biden is I don't even want to say that Biden is numerically too old, but he obviously has lost some like cognition, and he tries to play it off. And I think that like at the very least not being willing to like recognize that and talk about it or even mention it publicly is kind of selfish personally. Also, too antisocial to run for office. Well, depending on what office you're running for, if you're running for like a local government position, a lot of people run unopposed. So sometimes just running is all you need to do. You don't need to have like a bunch of commercials or like fucking kiss babies and shake hands or whatever. Like some people literally just getting on the ballot is all they need. Not to say you shouldn't put any work into it, but like it actually is can be compartmentalized a lot easier than you think depending on the position. Not to say that that automatically means you would enjoy yourself or have a good time. I know I wouldn't have a good time being a politician. I don't want to be a politician, like ever. Another reason cited against child voting rights is that children would be unduly biased by media and other societal pressures. Like adults aren't! Literally, boomers are like it's Fox News versus CNN. In cognitive research, some studies conducted in the 1970s offered a skeptical view of adolescent understanding of democratic principles like freedom of speech. However, this research is now recognized to have used challenging and contradictory vignettes that place a high demand on still developing verbal and metacognitive skills, which are not recognized as requisite to an understanding of individual political rights. Indeed, you should, even if you're a nonverbal, you should be able to fucking vote. Most recent research has unveiled that even elementary age children have a concept of freedom of speech, and by the ages of 8 and 9, this concept expands beyond a concern for personal autonomy into awareness for their social implications and the importance of the right to a political vote. Oh yeah, I'm also being reminded that as early as age 4, a child can have like have a holistic uh view of their own gender. This is correct. The fact that literally someone is running against you means the party has to spend money on your campaign. Same thing with sheriff offices. But I'm not gonna tell people to run for sheriff because ACAB. Cultural and religious issues. I'm mental age? Is it mental age? Mental age is a concept related to intelligence. It looks at how a specific individual at a specific age performs intellectually compared to average intellectual performance for that individual's actual chronological age. The intellectual performance is based on a performance and tests and live assessments by a psychologist. The score achieved by the individual is compared to the median average scores at various ages, and the mental age at, say, is derived from the individual score equates to the average score at age X. However, mental age depends on what kind of intelligence is measured. For instance, a child's intellectual age can be average of their actual age, but the child's emotional intelligence can be immature for their physical age. Psychologists often remark that girls are more emotionally mature than boys at around the age of puberty. Also, a 6-year-old child intellectually gifted can remain a 3-year-old child in terms of emotional maturity. Mental age can be considered a controversial topic. Indeed. And we're not going to talk about it today. We'll put that in the back for later. Everything that I have pulled up before is all stuff that's in the description for the on the YouTube video for this. So if you want to look at any of the sources and look deeper into some of these things, it'll be there. Maybe I'll add the mental age one later. But we'll probably do a whole thing about that, especially with people who, especially considering there are people who specifically identify as being like a certain age, regardless of their physical body, but not necessarily age players. Though a lot of age players also are included in that. A man walks to a bar in New Orleans. Can I have a Corona and two hurricanes, please? The bartender. That'll be 2020. The oldest someone has gas to me to be is 30. I can't tell that's a good thing or a bad thing. What does that mean, has gas? You mean has energy? What it really means to be mature, according to Psychology Today, it starts with taking responsibility when things go wrong. Key points. Medical science has shown that adolescence continues into one's 20s, when the frontal lobe fully comes on board by age 26. In order to navigate committed relationships and marriage, we must first grow ourselves up. Exploring how one cuts off others, creates relationship triangles, and resists conformity or groupthink displays emotional maturity. I think it's really funny talking about conformity and groupthink because there's a lot of very powerful people who cannot resist groupthink. Just saying. Or groupthink displays of emotional maturity. Taking responsibility for one's missteps is a hallmark of maturity. Crafting villains into one's story with finger pointing is the opposite. Commencement speeches provide wisdom to graduates of all ages. With this passage, we often assume that those donning caps and gowns have it all together as they embark upon higher education or leave for promising careers. Do we? I don't think society does that. Not so fast. As a topic, maturity is debated in in medical literature since the neuroimagining shows that the brain matures well into the 20s. The frontal lobe, governing executive functions like working memory, impulse, and self-control, planning, and time management, is among the last brain area to mature. This occurs typically around age 26. Other studies have considered having different ages of majority depending upon legal issues, as being truer to developmental science that one set age for all matters. One boundary could apply where there is emotional arousal, time pressure, and coercion, whereas another is designated for those aged 18 and older, where physiosocial immaturity compromises judgment. Define maturity. According to Merriam-Webster, oh my fucking Christ, maturity means adulthood and full development. Unofficially, many adults who read the sage words of the late advice columnist Ann Landers may remember the column titled Maturity, easily found in an online search. In that classic prose, Landers wrote that people display maturity in patience, perseverance, decision making, dependability, self control, and humility. That is, the ability to admit simply, I was wrong. These can be really hard in this world, especially right now. Like, discourse and arguments online, a lot of people aren't willing to give up on being right. Um, we try not to mention Vosh in streams ever, but Vosh once said that he will never back down, that he will never. We saw a clip of him saying he will never admit to being wrong because that would be to admit weakness, and after he admits it once, then it'll be like a a weakness in his defense. And I have a bunch of issues with Vosh. However, I do think that mindset is very illustrative, is greatly illustrative of how a lot of people online, especially people who argue on websites, are. But also, American two-sided politics is often super confrontational. But it's kind of like wrestling. Like Democrats and Republicans, I'm pretty sure they like eat together. Just saying. But like, there's so many contradictions and like what would be considered scientific, like biological maturity, you know? Because, like, I would not tell someone that they can't drink until they're 26. I wouldn't. Who's Vosh? Don't worry about it. If you don't know who that is, then you're in good. You're good. That will never. That can never. You can never get it back once you know. When you turn 100 in the UK, you get a letter from the king. When you turn 16 in the UK, you get a text from Prince Andrew. Well, you better hurry up. The king's probably gonna die soon. I think he got cancer. In 2013, Washington Post columnist Carolyn Hatz wrote about how to be one's best self. She proposed a probing list of questions, including, "Do you realize that your needs have the same status as everyone else's?" These are all these contradictions. Okay, so this one is something we've been struggling with for our entire life, and I think that a lot of people who have deep seated trauma have lots of issues with these things, and so like these frameworks feel very stagnating or very disheartening. It's kind of like when you look at the as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's like, oh yeah, I can't. I'm not supposed to be able to like reach self realization if I don't, eat regularly or have like a roof over my head. And it's like, oh, I guess people who are unhoused aren't just didn't have identity growth according to that framework, you know. And I reject that. Um, In 2013, Washington Post columnist Carolyn Hatz wrote about how to be one's best self. And to be fair, this is to be one's best self, not to be an adult. Do you realize that you have that your needs have the same stats as everyone else's, and that you're not the hero in every encounter with others? That other one is more about humility. That's fair. I like having that imbalance. And shit, we know that for sure. We're villains in some people's stories. Damn it, you're gonna research who Vosh is? Okay. Vosh is a political YouTuber and streamer, technically a streamer, uh, mostly a streamer, I guess you would say. He's a big, he's a big personality in leftist internet politics. Uh, he's a white cis bisexual guy with a beard, and he is known for being very vulgar. A lot of people who describe the like a subset of the left as like what was the word? I forgot what the specific term was, but thinking about like a reactionary left or thinking about leftism in the context of like a dirtbag, that's what it was. The term dirtbag left was coined because of folks like Vosh. And some people think that that style of like political punditry is valuable on the left because like leftists in general are like too neat and tidy apparently. I think they're thinking of Democrats, not leftists, when people say that. But regardless, there is a perception that the left is overly squeaky clean and can't let loose and have fun. And in the importance of meeting someone where they're at, some people propose that the dirtbag left is a necessary evil to get less principled folk on our side as leftists. Even if I agreed with that position, I feel like Vosh is not a good poster child for this. Or I suppose you could say that idea is taken to its maximum because the problem with that is if people are not principled and are only into leftism for only their own self gain, then it can have lots of problems because Vosh has said a lot of transphobic stuff, a lot of racist stuff, a lot of homophobic stuff, a lot, and actually has a history of his audience has a history of bothering people, of harassing people, And of course, like a lot of big pundits, especially ones that are more in the reactionary variety in the more typical sense, Vansh does not generally assume any responsibility for anything his chat does, even though he generally sometimes gives them direct commands on harassing a queer woman until she agrees with him, for example. Or to bother someone who wrote a scathing piece, or sorry, who did a scathing YouTube video about him until he takes it down. Not a great person, and someone who I don't feel like represents me as a leftist. I like to believe he's done some good sometimes, maybe a fucking debate stream or like raising money for something, but he's caused an incredible amount of harm, and I am generally not a fan of his. But at the same time, he is a great streamer, despite all the shit I just said. I have seen a few of his streams or stream segments, and he is captivating. You can be a shitty person and be good at what you do. I'm sorry, Daddy. I was naughty. What's something you can say in church and while having sex? I come in the name of the Lord. Thanks. I really enjoyed that levity. Fuck. Whew, boy. That clip is gonna suck later. Never too old to grow up. Jenny Brown, MSW, writes in Growing Yourself Up, how to bring your best to all of life's relationships, that the overriding question remains, am I up for addressing the immature part I'm playing in relationships? Does she... Did she write a fucking light novel? That sounds like a light novel title. Growing Yourself Up, how to bring your best to all of life's relationships, that the overriding question remains, am I up for addressing the immature part I'm playing in relationships? Gosh, that's a journey, honestly. Seeing what we need to change about our unhelpful reactions and working on them in the world of relationships creates positive ripple effects into the systems we're part of, Brown writes. It can even ripple into future generations. Oh wait, it's probably all of life's relationships that have overriding. Wait, no, no. There's multiple like hyphens or whatever, or colons. So yeah, I don't know at what point the book title ends, especially because this is a quote. Although it might not be a book, it might be an article. So they could be including the headline and the byline. It makes sense that they're including the headline and the byline, but like I don't know why you would include the byline too. I'm not a journalism major, but that is not necessary for a citation. Sonny, why is it sorry? Does anyone know a good place to publish something if you're gonna be adding more and more to a story over time? WordPress? I would say you could do itch.io. People put like stories on itch.io. One of our favorite light novel authors publishes on itch.io. So you could do like chapters at a time. And you don't have to charge for them either if you don't want to. Oh, we're sorry about the Vosh thing. Oh, okay. I was playing it up a little bit, but we went a long time without really talking about Vash. I'm pretty sure we've talked about him on stream before, but literally it would have probably been at least 2 or 3 years ago. Like we went on a streak. And I mean, honestly, we have tried not to say a lot of bigger leftist names because there is a black leftist creator who was pretty small who got fucking doxed and like ground into the dirt. A black trans woman at that. For like some beef that she had with some bigger pundits, and we just whoo that scares the shit out of me. We won't be able to avoid like lots of shit forever. That's what the response to our for our Bridget video taught us. we're going to have to find a way to navigate criticism bordering on harassment and harassment if we are going to go far as a public figure. And that is probably one of the saddest things about being a public figure. I mean, we've only ever gotten one death threat. That's so low, especially for a baby fur. Also, if you're making your own content, it's not a terrible opportunity to learn to write a website. We have a website that we're building or trying to build. Um, NeoCities. So you can get a domain with them for free. It's pretty cool. Seeing what we need to change about our unhelpful reactions and working on them in the world of relationships creates positive ripple effects into the systems we're part of, Brown writes. It can even ripple into future generations. In what Brown dubs the change and blame dance, she reports, when you're finding fault in others, we stop when we're finding fault in others, we stop working on ourselves. Our growing gets stuck in the blame rut. I don't necessarily disagree with this. And even if that fault is true, I would say especially if that fault is true, especially from the perspective of someone who's been abused, right? Because, but also abuse can trauma can keep you stuck. Like having it like a traumatic flashback is literally experiencing being back at that time. So like, it is something to like try to uh at least be aware of. Not to say that getting out of the blame rut means you need to go, oh, it was actually my fault, which was actually our problem for until this year. Our families of origin serve as a relationship template. It's where we learn how to be and think, what the roles of husband, wife, father, and mother look like. So there's gonna be a lot of conflict with our beliefs in this, and part of the reason we even chose this article was to show how in like modern popular psychology, the you're still gonna be talked about the like emotional maturity and like dynamics of family are going to be talked about in a very cishet way, and in general, people, let alone queer people, have less and less um like identity found within a typical family dynamic, especially with the high amount of queer people who are abused and or like thrown out or made destitute by their families. Like we have like so many variants of life experiences that is not useful. Even if we ended up being like straight and cis, the general like nuclear family shit would not have helped us. We were raised by two moms, but we were raised by two parents. Like we almost had the nuclear family. But the thing is, the examples that we had, and it wasn't because of the genders of our parents, just the toxicity of their ideals, and them not valuing mental health like at all, was like something that we could not emulate. We didn't have a lot of role models because we didn't want to be like our parents. We didn't want to be like our siblings. But that's a story for another day. I keep getting caught in the past. Sorry. In 2018, Roberta. Wait, did I skip? No. In 2018, Roberta Gilbert, MD, updated her classic book, The Eight Concepts of Bowen Theory, which I often point therapy clients to obtain a quick understanding of the nuclear family emotional system, family projection, and multi generational transmission of anxiety, sibling position, cutoff, triangles, and the differentiation of self. I think that some of these are valuable, especially if these are concepts that you grew up with, and recognizing that, because like regardless of if we never talk to anyone we're blood related to ever again, we still have to deal with like the generational trauma that like came with our family, not even trauma from like what we lived through, but like how the trauma that like people older than us went through and how that affected other people. There's actually a really good episode of Summer Camp Island about this. It's when the otter learns how to ride a broom, I believe. It's like in season 4. I forget the name of that episode. Damn, I miss Summer Camp Island. Differentiation means how susceptible one is to family of origin, conformity, and groupthink. Dr. Gilbert writes that feelings will come and go, but learning to be more thoughtful over the life of your life course and learning to see the family as an emotional unit, not as individuals, is best. Hard disagree. Thinking systems and working on oneself where one has that control rather than finger pointing and insisting others change, which is typically futile and out of one's ability to change. That is true. That's the work to be done, hence an emotional maturity measure. Where I'm at with this is basically like not a family can't be like an emotional unit, but like everyone is an individual, and I'm not just being an American individualist right now. There's also like dynamics between all the specific members. Like if you know Amori, there's when you switch who's the front of the line, and it does the little picture of someone tagging out with Amori or whatever. It's like that kind of like everyone has their own unique way of relating to each other, different ways that they operate in conflict or in collaboration. And I think that those things are important too. I would say someone should see a family or a group or a found family, or even a local community as both an emotional unit and a number of individuals. But that's just me. Key behaviors that show maturity. This is the bread and butter of this one though, especially in when I laugh and gay. Think, how do we impact one another rather than why can't that person? That's useful. Resist the childish impulse to blame others when things don't go well in life. This one's a little too vague for me, honestly, especially because they didn't have to include the word childish. They infantilize this impulse. They're saying that this impulse is one of childishness, but I think there's more context that is into individual situations, especially living under capitalism. Someone might use this sort of framework to be like, oh, instead of unionizing, you should focus on how you can get yourself into a better position. I just don't like how easily this can be used toxically. Do not overfunction for others for extended periods. Practice true help by setting them on an independent and successful path. I don't think that's always possible, but technically that's what I'm doing right now. Instead of trying to give each individual person advice if they need it, we do try to have streams where we talk about broad sweeping topics that we think might be of note for our audience, and using our own experiences in life and in the queer community and being marginalized and disabled, and relating to other people as a way to talk about things that other folks might struggle with or have to navigate. So that's cool. Being a VTuber is such an adult activity. See triangles form and recognize how futile they are in any group or family. This prevents immaturity pitfalls and aids problem solving between the two people who need to work things out. They mean like getting a third party, like a middleman kind of thing. That's something that really fucked up our last long term relationship actually, because we kept kind of playing telephone, and generally it was one partner having an issue with us and the other partner of ours being vented to, and then coming to us and telling us about it, and telling us the reasons that the other person was upset, or wasn't okay with something, or felt violated, and we would talk it out, and then like the day would end or whatever. And that's persona day, and then later it would still come up as an issue, and we'd be so confused. It's like, wait, I just assumed that what we talked about was something you're going to relay back to them, and it'll be figured out. Which is really silly on our part in one way, but also like was way should have been way too easy, even if that would have been okay. Like relationships do take effort for sure. So yeah, it's very important if you can have direct communication. Though sometimes conflicts that need mediation are useful, but in that case, it's not telling someone, "Hey, tell the person who's mad at me this." It's more like, "Hey, I want to talk this out with this person, and if I can get them to agree for us all to meet up, I would like for you to help with mediation." Sometimes mediation looks like a family or couples therapist, for example. Realize that relationships are much like geometry. The closest distance between 2 points is a straight line, not through a third party. This is literally just this. These should have just been one. Refrain from fault finding, but consider your own role and how you're contributed to any upset. This is actually like fairly useful like therapy stuff. And I don't think that it's. I mean, talking about maturity as opposed to being an adult, I think is actually a way better way. So I am glad that it's talking about maturity, and they even had that part like you can quote unquote grow up at any age, right? Um, and obviously, I shouldn't say obviously. I don't necessarily believe in like old soul. I don't. I don't believe in old souls, and I hate when people like try to gas up younger people. And it's like you're so mature for your age, because when you hear that enough, it really fucks with you, and people will hold adult expectations on kids or people who just are young and don't need the amount of weight you're putting on them, or you're treating them like you would treat an adult in a very fucked up way, and that sucks. So I always that sort of phrasing always fucks with me, but like being able to take responsibility for yourself, I think is really good and important. And honestly, we live in a world where you have to there's a certain amount of responsibility you're expected to take for yourself way before you become legally an adult. So I don't think maturity is uh like all just that one part, not all it's not all social, and it's not all like biological. It's a combination, right? And also your experiences. Keep from being a chameleon, shifting views to curry favor with others. That just sounds like fawning. That just sounds like fawning. That's a trauma response. Know your values and be principled in your decisions. Counseling sessions can help people identify these so they don't indecisively fence it. Wow, went all this way through the article without them saying you should go to therapy? Good. Summon your best maturity skills for committed relationships, especially marriage. If one party acts childishly through passive aggression, underfunctioning, pettiness, blame, or defensiveness, therapy should be sought. Oh, no, they doubled down on a C therapy. Underfunctioning is the one where I'm kind of scared, though they didn't actually have a link for that. Obviously, underfunctioning is the opposite of overfunctioning, like doing so much for someone else that it hurts you and you're not able to take care of yourself. Um, I feel like underfunctioning is almost victim blaming. But if you having mental health issues, seeking therapy is good. I don't know. I just maybe I just don't like psychology today. I probably don't like psychology today. Oh, I know therapy is important. Therapy is very important. It's just not always available. And even if it is available, the more marginalized you are, the harder it is to find a good therapist. We talked about this on Blue Sky today earlier. Maybe we pull that up actually. But I gotta I gotta make sure I do it right because I don't want to accidentally show something I don't want to on stream. Let's see. Here we go. This was Scribble. Uh, Scribble said, "It's refreshing to see any takes online about therapy that isn't the discourse over telling people to get it. We've not been fortunate enough to be in therapy regularly, but of the times we have been able to do it remotely, it certainly helped. On one occasion, even saved our life. This was in response to someone saying, "Whenever I see a BetterHelp ad, I get so fucking mad. If you need to go to therapy, please go and see someone IRL instead of someone on a fucking telephone." And of course, we felt like, oh, this is a perfect point for discourse. So Scribble went on. All online therapy is not created equal. BetterHelp is not good therapy. But even therapy that's the more typical variety will allow for phone or Zoom call sessions. With our last therapist, they let us mix it up. So we went in usually, but did a call if I wasn't feeling up to leaving the house. Yeah, that was a godsend. Like, cause we do enjoy like physically being in the like office with them, but it's not always possible. But that's not to say that therapy is a magic bullet. A lot of people will go once or twice and give up, especially if you're a minority. Therapy can be ironically traumatic depending on the therapist. The fact that most therapists are white, vanilla, able bodied cis people means that many have little context to certain struggles. We've only ever had one therapist that was black, for instance, and out of the four we've seen regularly over our life, and the difference in being able to navigate or at least understand our issues was like night and day. And that was back when we were cis. Now finding a well equipped therapist is even harder. Kink positive, queer positive, hopefully non white, but don't hold your breath, has had professional experience with BPD and DAD while also being plural positive is basically our checklist. I know that conventional wisdom says any therapist is better than none at all, but I assure you, therapists can do harm. Now I'm circling back to the in-person versus online therapy. I prefer in-person therapy, but with so many variables, I think online/phone can be even more valuable, just not better help. Especially if you can have a therapist that's right for you that meeting with is not constrained by physical distance. Yeah, that's a good point. If you Although there is an issue with that because you're generally for therapy, unless you're paying out of pocket, like if you have insurance, the therapist that your insurance covers is typically those in your area. Like there's a certain like um neighborhood of like covered care for where you live generally. And of course, like you can get a certain amount of visits, like maybe like if you're on vacation or out of state for whatever reason. But generally, if you're out of coverage, then you will have to, pay out of pocket. And unfortunately, the physical location of where the therapist practices will have a direct effect on this. So if the best therapist for you is not in your state, then if you can meet with them, even though it is online, you will most likely not have access to that therapist without paying out of pocket. Which ironically is one of the positive things about BetterHelp because it's not like constrained to just where you live. However, in general, I don't like BetterHelp, and maybe we should do a thing about that eventually. But BetterHelp is generally not as quality, I would say, in general. I love how therapy is important made me read a whole fucking tweet thread. All right. We're moving on from maturity, but still keep that in mind while we talk about subspace. Now I'll have a little bit more fun. The science behind why and how many people experience a blissed out dream state. I wish I could just make this go away. Subspace is the word given to the pleasurable altered headspace that the submissive partner experiences during a BDSM scene. For many subs, entering this space can be the ultimate goal in BDSM, with some even giving it higher importance than achieving orgasm. As a state of mind, it can be transcendent as science. It can be transcendent. As a science, it has some fascinating bodily effects. What does it feel like? Subspace differs from individual to individual. People have described subspace as entering a blissed out dream state, while others have compared it to being in a trance. Other common accounts describe it as feeling floaty, foggy, euphoric, or like an out of body experience. Subs in subspace may have a higher pain tolerance, have difficulty speaking, or lose all sense of time. Wow, that just sounds like me on a fucking on like a dissociation trip. Likewise, getting to subspace is different for every submissive. For some people, it might be triggered simply by slipping into a roleplay scenario, donning a collar or a particular outfit, or being called a certain nickname. More often, subspace takes a bit more effort to attain. Some subs only reach subspace through activities that require them to relinquish a sense of control, such as bondage, sensory deprivation, or simply obeying orders. For subs who are also masochists, the pain from flogging can lead to a release of endorphins that help them get to that dreamlike state. What happens to the brain during subspace? This is a question that the team at the Science BDSM, a research team led by Professor of Social Psychology Brad Sagrin, sought to answer in a 2016 study. In a study published in Psychology of Consciousness, scientists observed knowledgeable practitioners before and after engaging in BDSM scenes. Participants answered surveys to measure self-reported stress and sexual arousal. Saliva samples were taken to measure levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, and testosterone, a hormone associated with aggression and dominance. Everyone has both testosterone and estrogen in their bodies. Don't worry, trans femmes. It's okay. The participants answered surveys to measure self-reported stress and sexual arousal. Saliva samples were taken to measure cortisol and testosterone. Participants also completed a strop test, commonly used to assess cognitive flexibility. Shut up. When comparing pre and post scene results, the bottoms of the scenes achieved a decrease in stress, an increase in sexual arousal, and absolutely tanked the strop test. According to the study, this aligns with Dr. Arndrijk's transient hypofrontality hypothesis. The hypothesis is based on the premise that the brain possesses limited resources. Activities that increase demand on the sensory part of the brain, such as long-distance running, meditation, or being on the receiving end of a flogging, end up reducing blood flow to the frontal lobes of the brain, which are responsible for decision-making, speech, and short-term memory. So there you go. That's why you get all loopy toward the end of a scene. So cool, right? Sadomasochism for the win! Where are my sadomasochists at? Many dominants report feeling their own version of altered consciousness, though it manifests differently than subspace. Generally, doms report feeling high from the sense of heightened power and control over their sub in the scene. The study conducted by the team at the Science of BDSM also measured the responses in tops before and after participating in a BDSM scene. They found that tops, who for the purposes of the study took up the dominant role, entered a state of, I feel like I have to explain this. A lot of people conflate being a bottom with being a sub and being a top with being a dom. Sometimes we use these terms interchangeably ourselves, and we're trying to get better at not doing that. But these terms are different and important, even though a lot of times they can overlap, and it is okay. And I'm not saying that you can't do bottom jokes. It's totally okay. You can still be, oh, bottom surgery, but I'm already a bottom. It's fine. I promise.
Wait, did you buy this?
Yes.
Okay.
Were you just like, this is in our fridge. Maybe we should drink it. I mean, technically I didn't buy the Scribble did, but whatever. Can you open it?
Yes.
Thank you. I would tell you what we're talking about, but you already know. You've been walking around. Why did I zoom in? I forget. I was trying to make a point, but now I forgot. Sorry, my short-term memory lapsed because brain left my frontal court. Brain blood wasn't being properly supplied to my. You're letting me do the marble? Yeah. Wait, is that? Am I doing it right? Wait, no. There we go. Ha ha ha! I have cognitive ability. Oh wait.
Oh wait.
We got a off-brand ramen from the store apparently. Thanks, Scribs. I think we only got one because we didn't know if it was gonna taste like shit or not. Wow. Do you want to say hello to chat, big sis?
Hello, chat, big sis.
Oh,
Hello to chat, big.
mm. Oh, you weren't muted. I was just pressing the button that makes me blush. You should try this.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Salem Massacre, my friend here. Yeah, good job. Specio, are you also a sadomasochist? Or do you believe you're a sadomasochist and still need to experiment? Hello, fluff nesting flumped. Oh, also, y'all should get prepared for us not streaming in the living room anymore because we're still doing our Juneteenth weekend like subathon, so we'll be streaming for like 3 straight days or whatever. But when we start doing that, we're moving back to our room. So if you've been enjoying this year's streams that have been out in our living room, savor them well. Uh, Many dominants report feeling their own version of altered consciousness, although it manifests differently than subspace. Generally, doms report feeling high from the sense of heightened power and control over their sub in a scene. We've experienced this altered headspace too. Top space, whatever, dom space. Oh, right, that's why I have fucking zoomed in. I was supposed to explain the difference between being a bottom or a sub as opposed to being a top or a dom. Sub and dom are more what people are talking about when they're like, oh, like bottom surgery jokes, right? In the way that I made one earlier. Um, the person who submits versus the person who dominates. But top versus bottom is, to use a more clear example, the person who penetrates versus the person who is penetrated. Though penetration doesn't have to be part of it. Like if you're getting an over the knee spanking, if you're the one getting spanked, you are bottoming. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are subbing. I was like, how would that even work? And I was remembering the last time that we spanked our partner and we got like 100 swats in and our wrist is hurting. I'm like, why won't you cry? So yeah, it's not a strict dichotomy. Stop smiling at me. You're dumb. Shut up. Anyway, they found the tops who, for the purpose of the study, took up the dominant role, entered a state of flow, as conceptualized by a psychologist. Merely, I cannot pronounce the other name. I'll butcher it. I'm sorry. Flow is, flow state, like when you get really into the game. Flow is characterized by 9 dimensions. Ugh. Maybe I shouldn't have put a stuffer in before stream. This the study conducted by the team at the Science BDSM also measured the responses in tops before and after participating in a BDSM scene. They found the tops who, for the purpose of the study, I keep reading this over and over again, the 9 dimensions, including challenge skill balance, concentration on task, sense of control, and loss of self-consciousness. Dom space functions as a complement to subspace. As one partner relishes the lack of control, the other one takes pleasure in retaining it. What is subdrop? If subspace is like being drunk on giddy feelings, subdrop is the hangover that follows. Subdrop can be felt after an extreme BDSM scene, once the surge of hormones, including endorphins and adrenaline, has subsided. Every sub undergoes sub drop differently and can manifest itself differently every time. It can last for a couple of minutes to several days, depending on the intensity of the scene. Aftercare, open communication with your scene partner, and being kind to yourself are all ways to mitigate sub drop. Indubitably. Though that I do like that term they use, mitigation. There's if you experience sub drop, it's not gonna be something you can uh, always avoid, but you can make it hit you less. And that framework is useful for other things too. There's a term called con drop. So if you went to like an anime convention or a furry convention or something, like the like kind of lethargic and like kind of sad feelings you get maybe on the last day or when you're like on your way back home or when you first come into work or school or whatever, then that's Monday. um, People refer to that as con drop. I mean, because being at con is kind of like being at like a theme park in a way, and there's like this added elation, even though obviously you can't stay on nine for every second of like 3 days straight. There is like this sense of belonging and like like these are my people if you're having that experience, of course. So if you have a really good con, generally you're gonna get con drop. I think I've experienced con drop actually. Oh, really? Do you want to talk about it? I'd be interested in hearing about it. Okay, so I kept talking about Leadhead. And now we're actually going to watch some of the video that kind of inspired this chatting. So I guess I'm a reaction streamer for a little bit. Um, we're not gonna watch the whole video, but we're watching all of the people were parts of the video. There's a part towards the end where she does a barking tutorial. We're not gonna go to the barking tutorial. It's just not necessary for what we need here today. Barking is good and fine, and you should do it if you like it. But we're not doing that right now. Okay? Okay.
At some point in the last few years, there was this little shift, especially in the queer community, where suddenly you couldn't go 5 minutes on social media without finding somebody calling themselves a puppy girl. A lot of the time, it's just a label attached to a subgroup of kinky people, girls who like to be put in cages or yanked around on a leash. Or, in more safe for work circles, cosplayers who want to show off a new weighted tail that they made for their next convention, or furries who have a whole separate persona as a cartoon dog. Then, somewhere in the mix, there are a lot of people who just want somebody to stroke their hair. In the interest of making sure that nobody can ever predict what my next video is going to be about, that last group is the one that I'm going to be focusing on today. These puppy girls are cultivating a fine balance between self-expression and full-blown dissociation.
The I will say again, in case folks weren't here for it, didn't remember, our main we like this video, but the thing we wish was not left on the cutting room floor, and probably was partially because of the scope of the video and time, because this video was not very long, was like sort of divorcing it from kink in a way, but more like in a soft way, because she didn't say that it didn't the a kink perspective didn't matter. It was just not what she was focusing on, and that is fair and valid. But and of course, obviously, I'm biased because I come from a like fetish kink perspective, but also as an otherkin slash Therian or whatever, like there's overlap with like being an animal person that is not just like like when I'm happy I wag my tail even though my tail does not physically exist type shit, And so like certain things with dynamics and stuff, and like we talked about earlier, like like live-in dynamics, or 24/7 as some people call it. Actually, I think most people would call those type of situations. Like 24/7 kink is very similar to what she's going to talk about, especially if you leave out the sets. Honestly, I don't remember any details of the con drop. Just that I felt depressed on the drive home. Apparently, my grandparents didn't like to travel because they would feel down after returning. Yeah, that I mean, it's a normal like people thing. It happens. Real. Noting your tone for the funny.
And I think that it's an incredibly interesting conversation. Turns out, there's a lot more to this whole animal person thing than just a simple kink or a fandom. They're called Therians, people who've found a distinct sense of identity from adopting certain traits from animals. In the same way that some people, whom, like myself, are attracted to both men and women but still find that the label lesbian fits them the best, Therians have found that even without a tail, or paw pads, or a flat nose, ascribing the traits of particular animals to themselves can be a quick and easy shorthand for the personality traits that they want to accentuate, and thusly being referred to as that animal is a surefire way to have those traits reaffirmed.
This is something that even furries that aren't like at the Therian level do. Like how if you're a furry, you probably have experienced this or done this firsthand. If you're not a furry, or maybe you don't have a persona right now, you haven't developed one or whatever, you may not have had this experience, but maybe you've seen it. There's a thing that furries on the internet tend to do, especially like furries who are friends with each other. Like, say I know someone who's a chocobo, has a chocobo sona. If I see like a fluffy yellow bird that looks like a chocobo, or like a legit chocobo, or maybe are of a chocobo, it's not just this sense of, oh, I know someone who has that sona. It's like this recognition and like a symbolism part of it, because the animals that someone chooses their sona tends to reflect, not always, certain attributes they value or would like to have even if they don't have them. It could be an idealized self, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, right? Um, she's actually going to talk about in terms of puppy girls, like dogs representing like being loyal, and like being called like a good dog, like can kind of reaffirm the things that are associated with that animal, and that's cool. Um, what I'm thinking about in terms of like the relevancy of kink in this thing is that there are a lot of folks that see lots of really great things in kink, in like from the kink experience, and they take it and they try to leave the like they try to leave the kink out of it, and it really should be like this meme here. Uh where it's like kinks and fetishes, and it's like see ace people, and then cut the sets slice, and then take the whole cake instead of the sets. This is what I think more people should be more comfortable doing, especially in the sense that like, and it doesn't matter if you're ace or not, right? Um, for what I'm saying, what I'm saying is more like, I feel like certain groups will assume that the kink part contains sets automatically, and they don't realize they can leave the sets, and they still have the kink, because the kink is an important framework, especially for like consent and like stuff like, sub drop and stuff like that. So those are relevant components that I feel like, by, if any, not to say that she is doing this, but if someone were to try to be a puppy girl and sequester themselves away from pet play specifically, then I feel like they would be um, losing out on community resources at the very least, even if they never want to engage in pet play sexually. And I have a very strong opinion about this because of how we have navigated age play. Because when we first got into age play, it was mostly sexual for us, but there was some identity stuff that was very important to us about that. And that definitely carried over through our life, because we always value being like wondrous and childlike, even outside of just, the autism or whatever. Like, there were just certain things that are like that made us feel very childlike, that we loved and wanted to hold on to. And we held on to as much of it as we could, whereas certain things about life forced us to not be able to keep as much. And fast forward to present day, and we see that there's littles like identifying as like littles in more than just like a role, where someone's like, I'm not role playing, like I am a little. And there isn't necessarily a term that I've found that really has that same, that resonates with me personally, that would describe a feeling that's kind of like Therian but age. I know that there is like mental age type like people that they, I forgot what terms, what other terms, like, oh, trans age. um just like with transracial, attaching trans to it automatically is going to get a lot of ire from people. And although I think that um like communication is important and that's the only thing you have, but that explains it well enough, then that's valid. But I think that a lot of people feel like to do something like that appropriates like transness or even queerness for some people. Like we remember people on Fat Life when we were still using it, talking about like, oh, like this, your fetish is not like being trans, or being kinky is not like being trans, or like being queer, and it's like there's a lot of overlap. And I don't want to say that every like straight head cis person, every cishet person who does like kink is like honorarily queer, but like they're queer in their fucking relationship. I'll say that much. Um, but I digress. Like, because I know that there are people who the line between what is play and what is like identity has already been like they've already gone over that line. I'm already very familiar with like this lifestyle and this lifestyle framework of being like, I feel most valid in my identity, or like in my personhood, in my existence in this role, or feeling like this. And that's like something that comes naturally to me. Sometimes it comes to someone through learned experiences, and it kind of like they grow and they change and it grows with them. So in the sense that there are people who role play. I'm talking about Lils again because that's like where our strong suit is in terms of knowledge. There are people who got into like ADBL and never experienced like little space or anything like that, or any type of altered consciousness, and like for years may have not. And some people never experienced little space or subspace or anything like that. But there are people who, after an amount of time doing the thing, it finally hit. Just like not everyone who like starts jogging will immediately get runner's high. Sometimes you might not get runner's high ever. Sometimes you'll be like 5 years into a fucking weekly jogging routine, and then randomly it hits. You know. Um, but I also think that identifying in these ways is more than just even leaving the sets. Like I've already left the sets on the table. Even within like the kink framework, I think that there is also room for like identity, and it not being necessarily an escape from responsibility. Again, latchkey little shit. Or I guess in that case it would be latchkey pet shit. Welcome back, Majora. Obviously, I'm biased because I.
It's no secret that I fall into this category. So, as an example, when my girlfriend calls me a good puppy, she isn't just saying, oh, you're cute and small. She's saying that I'm excitable, affectionate, loyal, attention seeking, curious, and just an overall good companion.
Yeah, furry shit.
It's her saying that she sees me as the type of person to run into a burning building for her.
Aww.
By extension, these same sentiments can be channeled into physical sensations by way of head pats and tummy rubs and the like. Her and I have this little thing where, if we're holding hands, 3 squeezes translates to, I love you. And in the same way, her scratching my head essentially translates to, you're super loyal and attentive. I know that all of this sounds incredibly silly, but sub
To me, it doesn't sound silly at all. And this is as someone who lives in a house with only furries. Sometimes we will cross paths and just make animal noises at each other. And between our roommate that is not in our polycule, there is like a more just general like sort of like animal sounds is high, but within like our like online friendships and within like our nesting partner's dynamic, like there are animal noises that mean very specific things, or generally specific things. It's actually really neat and useful. And again, I'm not trying to like trample over the framework that she's presenting, but showing how much the Venn diagram is sometimes a circle. That's all. Wow.
consciously attaching this extra layer of positive reinforcement to a sensation that already feels super nice, like having your hair played with, is an incredibly interesting and potent way of communicating love, if that's the type of dynamic that you share with somebody. In fact, it can be a little bit addictive. See, while there's a lot of positivity wrapped up in this whole dynamic for me, and a ton of other people like me, there are also some potential pitfalls, aspects of this way of self identifying that can absolutely get in the way of living a fulfilling life. I'm a lot more afraid of fireworks now than I used to be. However, before we get into the danger of puppy girls and the fall of the West and all of that fun stuff, let's talk about how I transformed into this crude mockery of nature's perfection that you see before you today.
All
A
right, all
bit
right.
over a year ago, my girlfriend moved in with me. On that first night, as she was unpacking her bags and showing me all the mementos that she'd brought with her, she pulled out this little necklace with a puppy tag on it. Her ex had given it to her because Puppy was one of his favorite nicknames for her. I immediately put it on because I thought it was cute, and before I knew it, Puppy had become her nickname for me as well. Some people call their partner princess or baby doll, sweetie. Well, for me it was Puppy, and at the time, that's all that there was to it. Since then, I first developed a taste for tummy rubs. Then I started to prefer my french fries hand fed. Then I started leaning more on body language and sounds rather than actual language when it came to communicating my physical desires.
Although consent is important and you should establish consent for things and like not just start falling trying to fall into a role and just trying to get your partner to intuit what you need. I think that uh our intersectionality is showing in the sense that as someone who sometimes goes nonverbal, sometimes even in positive situations, it's important for us to still be able to communicate. It's funny actually thinking about like the ways that people navigate their dynamics because in our relationship, at least with our nesting partner, if we're doing something, three squeezes means like orange, I guess, like a mix between yellow and red in a way, but generally is like a slow down or stop sort of thing, or I need a breather, kinda. And that is like so useful. But we use it outside of scenes too, so that's always useful. It can be like, oh, this is a little too much. It's I think it's incredibly important to have multiple ways to communicate certain things with the people closest to you. Um, because it could come in handy, especially if one of you cannot talk for a certain amount of time. And shit, even amongst people who aren't nonverbal, I think especially in my audience, with the amount of trans people who are usually around, say you got like vocal, like a vocal cord surgery to like change your voice, and that is a thing if you didn't know. You won't be able to talk for like several months, up to 6, I believe. So like there are many situations where that might be useful. And although maybe there are people who are fine, say, not being in a scene with a partner or not having sex for however long they can't talk, um, there are people who cannot talk at all and they can still bone or be intimate and stuff. And people who cannot talk are still allowed, like, consent is just different tools. So like even though relying only on like body language to confirm consent can turn into a slippery slope, it isn't always, especially if you've established patterns and especially if you've established consensual patterns with each other and you have a non-verbal way to read out of a situation or a scene. Just wanted to add that extra layer. Anyone else ever felt like you were gonna nut from your joints or chest popping? I plead the fifth.
Whatever, this is all just cute stuff. But at some point,
Oh, hi Joseph. How are you today? Uh, how do you identify? Are you more submissive or more dominant? Those are the only genders that matter. JK, JK, JK.
along the way, it became easier for me to tune out the conversations of the people around me and instead pay a disproportionate amount of attention to the squirrels and the chipmunks in the yard. I promise I'm still not joking. I started feeling like actual pride in being able to follow incredibly simple commands. I don't mean that I was being facetiously prideful in order to go along with the bit or make myself look cute. I mean that I started to equate that feeling with me being enough. Like, oh, I put my hand on theirs when they said paw to me. That means I didn't disappoint them, and I'm a worthwhile person. I'm proud of that fact. At the worst of times, this whole mindset has made me a little bit worse at saying no in situations where I wish that I had.
This is a really important point that we'll get into later. This isn't the last thing we're like navigating for this conversation, but I want to I wanted to like put a metaphorical pin there because we're gonna circle back to that later.
I'm just endlessly afraid of disappointing people. The fact that this is all, again, a sense of actual pride and not just myself going along with a bit is concerning. I've done a lot of things that I can be proud of in life. I turned my own imagination, creativity, and motivation into a career that's able to keep myself and the people I care about safe, most of the time at least. I've run this channel for nearly 6 years without ever running out of ideas for longer than a month or two, all while steadily upping my production skills and, in my opinion, my writing skills. Unless, of course, you count a Puppygirl video as running out of ideas. I've gone through an absolutely insane amount of personal growth in that same time. I grow into a better and more mature person with each year. I've held my own in a nearly lifelong battle with chronic anxiety and a near decade-long battle with the absolutely crippling long-term effects of a heat stroke, which, to dumb it down to the scope of this video, really messed me up neurologically. I've survived and thrived in spite of so much, and yet, in a certain type of situation, I take more pride in finding my girlfriend's shoes for her than I do in any of that stuff.
And that's fucking valid. But go on, go off.
So, I pay rent. I have 2 to 3 jobs, depending on how you look at it. I've got to buy groceries and manage finances and keep up with all sorts of other responsibilities. That's nothing special, just about everybody deals with this stuff. But it seems pretty clear to me that all of this puppy business also serves as a vector for dissociation. If I can make myself feel like such a simple creature that being able to shake on command is an accomplishment worthy of pride, then suddenly all the bills and finances and jobs feel like they're a million miles away. Suddenly, I'm too simple of a creature to have anxiety attacks. It's therapeutic at times. Everybody needs a means of escapism, but it's incredibly easy for me to get too comfortable in the dissociation. I get complacent, and my priorities shift from be a good partner, be a good friend, pursue my creative goals, and make money, straight to frolic, make silly noises, and eat food.
I do think that it is a struggle in society today to feel like you're enough to just exist. And I do think that different types of sub dynamics do allow for a lot of release of that tension. But of course, like I think at least mentioned a little bit earlier, it is very seductive to fantasize and even covet, basically just falling into that role and not having any responsibility at all. Real.
As I said, this whole thing can make it a little bit difficult to stay motivated. It's just hard to get out of bed when somebody's cuddling you, and that's all there is to it, really. But there are times when I'm just out of it. I've had a horrible day, I've got $5 in the bank and 2 little gas in my car to go door dashing for more. On days like that, I just curl up next to my girlfriend and she gives me some attention. Each stroke against my hair affirms to me that I'm good enough. It's a type of peace that I don't think I've ever been able to achieve outside of that context. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel like my problems can be compartmentalized. Put simply, it helps with the anxiety attacks. That, right there, is why I wear this collar on a daily basis. It's just that slight buffer that I need to make it through the toughest of times.
It's like she keeps just a little bit of, it's like 95% person, 5% dog, you know? What was it? Bruce Banner in the first Avengers movie. It's like, how can you turn into the Hulk whenever you need to? And it's like, oh, the truth is I'm always angry. And it's like, the truth is I'm always a little bit puppy. It's basically like that way of life sort of thing. And it is kind of cute and interestingly useful framework sometimes when you know you really, really, really don't want to do something, and it's just like, damn, I'm such a clever kiddo. They thought I was an adult when I went to the store and got all the groceries. Like, there are frameworks that allow you to keep that, you know?
It's a mental doghouse that I can retreat to when I feel overwhelmed and need to remember that there will be peace at the end of this day if I can just hold out for a little bit longer. That's what's so fascinating about this whole Puppygirl thing to me. That's what made it an interesting enough topic to make this video worthwhile. This particular type of self-expression can paradoxically turn into dissociation incredibly quickly. The two things seem like they would be polar opposites, but in this case, they're completely entangled. I am affectionate, loyal, attention-seeking, curious, and attentive. Those are all positive traits of mine that require zero responsibility on my part. But I'm also independent, ambitious, creative. I'm good at breaking down complicated tasks and admitting when I made a mistake. Those are also positive.
Hey, remember admitting when you made a mistake? That's part of maturity, apparently. Oh, welcome back, making lasagna. Good to have you back. Damn. Lasagna on a Friday? Oh gosh.
Traits, but maintaining those traits requires a lot of responsibility. And conveniently, all of the positive traits that are accentuated by me barking at people are the ones that I can just sort of passively claim. And all those other traits that elevate me from being a good companion to being a good person also represent the responsibilities that I dissociate from by barking at people. It doesn't feel like it takes any work to be a good puppy, but it takes a lot of work to be a good person, sometimes at least, even if it's work that I'm totally capable of.
Real.
It's like when I get home from work and take my hat off and put my collar on, I'm saying, all right, I'm done putting effort into my life. Time to curl up at the foot of the bed. However, in all 2 or 3 of my jobs, depending on how you look at it, I make my own hours. YouTube, DoorDash, and the third thing, I get to pick when I work and when I don't. And so it sometimes takes a lot of determination and focus to stop myself from being a puppy when I need to be a human. It just makes it hard to get shit done when I get too comfortable.
This was what hit us like a truck because our experience is a little bit different, at least in the last couple of years, because like we do want to make money from what we do, but even if we don't, it won't make us destitute. So like our art doesn't generally have to take a back seat to like what will keep us like strictly alive. And we do still have responsibilities. I mean, within being a content creator, we have responsibilities. We have a responsibility to you watching right now. I mean, I suppose we have a responsibility to entertain you or something, but like generally, like to instead of just entertainment, maybe I would say engaging, but also like I guess being valuable noise because sometimes we are noise and that's okay. But like and there are plenty of responsibilities that we have, and sometimes they are really hard to navigate, and sometimes we do fall really heavy into like you know being really little or being really animal and like not contending ourselves with like our responsibilities, but our responsibilities can generally be put on hold a lot more easily than our nesting partners, and it's actually why we especially try to foster independence and as opposed to codependence. What was it? Not comorbidity. That's a different thing. Um, so it's not codependence, but interdependence. And I think part of that is even kind of reflected in our political beliefs, like in leftism or communism or whatever, of like each according to their need and each according to their ability. And there is a niceness of feeling like enough, and there's a niceness of like with our the things that we can't do or the things that we struggle with, it being okay and having a framework that comforts us even when we fail or are struggling. And although just being like a person is enough even if they mess up, it's not quite as comforting, especially as a disabled person, as oh well, the fact you could do it at all is like a really big achievement, being as little as you are, for example. You know, so that's actually how we like kind of play with the stakes instead of like failing on something and being like, oh no, I'm a terrible adult. It'll be like, damn, guess I really am a kid. Okay, I am an overachiever though. Maybe I'll try it better next time. Like, there's all different ways to navigate it, and that's not to say that like if you struggle with it or you do overindulge that like you suck and you're immature and you shouldn't do kink. Like, everyone has to grow and struggle and learn. And if you have that willingness to learn, much like a kid might, then you might get better and be able to manage both the fun parts and the not so fun parts of life. That's part of what it means to have a life filled with happiness and sadness, you know? Um, but we are reminded sometimes that we can just lay on the floor and get pets and cuddles, but it is nice to be able to help out too, and it also makes us feel well rounded because there's certain ways we can't contribute to our household, and there's certain ways that we can, or even contribute emotionally. Like, imagine if Scooby Doo was like really eloquent.
And in a few cases, being a good puppy has gotten in the way of being a good person.
Real.
This has to do with the whole wanting to please people making it difficult for me to say no thing that I mentioned earlier. There was an instance where I didn't say no, when I really should have. And while I've spent a lot of time thinking about that mistake since then, there was this one pivotal moment that turned out to be completely definitive in both my moral recovery from that mistake and my character development as a puppy girl. My girlfriend was sitting alone with me, talking about everything that had happened, and she said the sentence that I'd been wanting her to say for so long. I know you're puppy-brained, but you still know right from wrong. Like I said, I'd been waiting to hear her say that ever since the moment that I first made that mistake and failed to say no. It made me feel a lot better, like she kind of understood how I wound up in that position, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized the irony in the whole thing. My girlfriend was the one who got me wrapped up in the puppy girl thing. She's the one whose head pats made me realize that this whole thing was something that my psyche could benefit from. But by saying, I know you're puppy-brained, but you still know right from wrong, she was calling me out. I'd leaned way too hard into my dissociation, and I made myself too easy to manipulate. I made myself too capable of saying, it's not my fault, that's just how the animal kingdom is. Sure, I'm generalizing. It's not like I didn't realize that I made that mistake or didn't think it was my fault. It's not even like I didn't own up to the mistakes. But what the puppy-brained side of me did do was make it easy for me to stagnate. It made it easy for me to feel like I didn't need to develop my character anymore, when that's never been the case for anybody.
Yeah, because to be alive is to grow and change, or at least to change. When you stop changing, you're dead. um, but I think that this is really interesting the way in the earnestness this is being talked about, not despite the subject matter, but despite the fact that it was her not respecting own like her own like limits. And we've had that happen to us too, but even outside of like like, you know, being regressed or puppy brain or whatever, just because we have trauma and our trauma response is fawning. And if we ever feel like we're fucking up with someone, we have a impulse to fawn that we have to actively suppress. But we also love doing service, you know, and that's a big part of our identity, especially within a domestic dynamic, let alone like a relationship dynamic. So like much like being in that altered state of consciousness is can be wrapped up in disassociation. Uh, the same thing can happen elsewhere. Whew, gosh, we talked about a lot today. Been going on for 2.5 hours. Hopefully, we'll finish the chatting in the next 30 minutes. Holy crap! Um, wow.
Personal growth is what makes our sentience a superpower, and my theory and bullshit was getting in the way of my personal growth for a while. When she said, I know your puppy brain, but you still know right from wrong, that was her challenging me to be better, to not let myself stagnate, to not allow myself to get lost in my dissociations. She wanted me to remember that while she'll always be there to stroke my hair and say that she's proud of me, ultimately it's on me to make sure that I continue in my personal growth. Nowadays, I feel like I've almost completely rid myself of all of that hesitance in personal growth. I feel like for all my flaws and all the things that I need to work on, I've gotten to the point where I'm able to be a responsible, penitent human when I need to be, and a carefree puppy when I'm able to. I'll never be able to say I'm done growing as a person, but now I'm at least able to progress again. My development has resumed. It's something that takes constant effort because the mental doghouse is an extremely
This
comfortable
is
place.
such a good video.
But so long as I can maintain that effort and keep myself in check, I'll only ever be in that mental doghouse when I don't have anywhere else that I need to be. So, to my girlfriend, and to anyone else who might be watching this, I'd just like to say two things. Firstly, and secondly, and more importantly, thank you for giving me the opportunity to grow and to be a better person. I promise that I won't waste it. I'm gonna make you all proud. Can't believe I just made that video.
Immediately takes a Persona 3 meme or a Persona 3 ending song. Anyway, the rest is the Patreon stuff as their Patreon like supporters and the barking tutorial. You should follow Leadhead. Leadhead makes a lot of cool videos, usually about video games, but subjects can like run the gambit, just like any interesting video essays, in my opinion. And you should totally watch the video yourself, especially for the barking tutorial, because it's most people who watch a video through someone else's stream and talking about it don't usually watch the actual video. And for the most part, I don't expect everyone here to actually go to Leadhead's videos, or especially this video if they've not resonated. But you know, just trying to encourage it. Be a responsible content creator. Okay, done with Puppygirl psychoanalysis. I already mentioned you don't have to have sets be intrinsically involved in kink and fetishes, and like you know talked about how it's not just aces who do this or who can do this or can get something out of it. That's kind of the whole. That's part of the whole point of me having shown and kind of talked about and around the Leadhead video in the first place, because it's like that's definitely pet play, and pet play and like theory and stuff definitely has a like overlap, but you know it's a thing. Tutorial vids are awesome. I mostly look at tutorial vids about like art or how to do a thing for a stream or something, as opposed to something like barking. Though I think we could bark pretty well. Yeah, easy. We don't need a tutorial for barking. I'm a fucking poodle. Um. But that's not the only animal sounds we can make. We're pretty good. Fucking bird sounds. Maybe I'm fucking up right now. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. I'm not whistly enough today. Maybe I should drink some more water. You can do a real goat baa. That's pretty cool. Our nesting partner has been doing a fucking goat scream at us a lot lately. Yeah. All right, we're almost done. Submission and learned helplessness. This is the thing that part of Leadhead's video led us to think about a lot because of how you can stagnate, and learned helplessness happens a lot as a result of abuse. But I do think using using kink and like different dynamics to attempt to absolve yourself of responsibility and like stop being responsible or like taking responsibility for yourself can lead to learn helplessness. And I think that it's so powerful to recognize that that when you say fuck it to your own limits, that you are doing yourself a disservice. And I think it's amazing I think it's amazing and like is a standard, to have a partner who sees you disrespecting your own boundaries for the sake of making them happy and go, hey, you shouldn't do that. I think that is good, and I think that there is a I know a lot of people will be hard on this, but I think that it is seductive being in that dominant position, and that having someone like basically be like, "I'll do anything. I'll do things that are against my own morals for you." That's an intoxicating level of power, but you have to also deal with it responsibly. Like even though it does do that, I think that I like that the focus of that video was from her position and not being like what the responsibilities of like her owner or her dom or whatever are, you know? Because they both have responsibilities, but actually kind of connected to that one Psych Today article we were reading earlier. Being able to, admit when you were wrong and stuff is like super important and part of like maturity and stuff like that. And as much as like there is an association with and it makes sense that there's an association with immaturity and like being like a child or childish or whatever. Like I don't think it's one to one, and you can be childlike without being irresponsible, or puppy like without being irresponsible if you prefer. um but I think that there is a value in the subs position. I think that it's really important to remember that you have power and that in power exchange, you are giving that power to another person that you trust. And it's not just they're so amazing that they automatically are better than you. I think the safest power exchange is one in which you already feel equals or as close to equals as you can manage. Because, when you have a situation when you're living with your partner and they're paying the rent, but they also have a dominant like king position over you, like that can make things really hard, and that's something that we have tried to be proactive with in our own life, because we have made mistakes. Whoa, Oh shit. Though I'm a satyr and notably a big girl, so obviously I don't need to use my ba skills. Oh, okay, okay. Submission and learn helplessness. This is just a Reddit post because there's just like not a lot of stuff we want to talk about. Just people haven't really talked about it, at least in the ways that we've been looking for it. But then again, Google results and generally search engines on the internet suck now, so it might also be that. I've long identified myself as kinky. I am primarily sadistic, but I'm also a dominant. I enjoy DS and power exchange. My girlfriend of a year and I have a lot of kinky sets, ropes, clamps, blindfolds, etc. Yesterday, we were having fun with some friends, and it came out that one of my friends, a female, had recently gotten out of a master slave relationship. We had known she was having a tough time lately, but not why. At this point, I was asleep, past 2 a.m., so I don't know firsthand what happened, but my friend was saying things like, I really needed this, as my girlfriend was playing with her. The, the only way a friend could get off was if she was being hurt. This really this really sat badly with my significant other. She decided that DS relationships were wrong because they were teaching subs learned helplessness. That's the reason why our friend was so messed up, was because her previous master had messed with her through learned helplessness. Then she extended that to all dub sub, dom, and sub activities as morally objectable due to the ease of abuse. We actually had a similar thing. We were good friends with someone at a time who had a traumatic experience with ADBL, and so considered all ADBL to be like, I forgot how they phrase it, like pedophilia play, and it was just like, I can't deal with you right now. It's like, just because someone used the pretense of what should have been a respectful and honorable, quote unquote honorable, like dynamic, and they abused you, does not mean that the whole culture is wrong. You know, and trauma associations are hard to deal with. So I'm not exactly trying to like make anyone feel bad for like having those like an urge of being like, oh shit, this is bad, or like feeling like it is. Like it makes sense in a lot of ways to try to think critically about a thing. I remember when we first learned about plurality, the first thing that went through our head was, how is this different than DID? And does being plural make a mockery of DID in some way, or is it disrespectful to like folks with DID in some way? And that didn't come from a place of trauma. That came from a place of, trying to be respectful of neurodivergence, or at least at the time we had saw it as just disabled people. You know, and it can be hard to know uh if you're being like justified in like a hard stance you have, especially if the hard stance is not like, it's not for me. If your hard stance is, this is bad and no one should do it, like the ongoing stuff between antis and pro fiction folk generally. Or I should say, the things with antis, because pro fictional folk just want to live, whereas antis are like, you should go to jail for this drawing. But it's that same idea. Even if you don't have firsthand trauma with a thing, some people automatically have assumptions with certain things, and they have misaligned perspectives on the community, especially from outside of it, or if, you've been hurt within it, or know someone who's been hurt within it. You know, there are plenty of people who think that all like BDSM is abuse, for example, not realizing, or maybe willfully ignorant of, just how much like consent and trust is in well maintained dynamics. I'm trying not to do like true Scotsman fallacy stuff, because even if someone abuses you within a kink dynamic, that doesn't mean that they weren't really kinky necessarily. Though the tenets of kink in the kink community are very much based in consent, and that is important. I would say that they're not being a good kinky person, or they're not being a good dominant, or even submissive, because some submissives can be abusive too. Like, it's more complicated. It's not black and white, like anything in life. As a big, I literally cannot use power over a little that they did not give to me. True, true. I mean, is I want to say true. I mean, I am saying true. I agree, but only up to a point. I do agree that like it is power exchange because you are giving the power. Though some people do have like bad intentions or whatever. And I don't necessarily want to leave those people out because at least in talking about it, I don't want to not to say like, oh, people who don't respect consent should be part of like the kink community. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, um, if we were to say that that doesn't count as being like kinky or like they weren't doing it right, I feel like that makes it such that if anyone messes up, there's a higher chance that people will like try to invalidate their position in the community. So that all is to say that under the correct circumstances and how I think kink should happen, you are completely correct. Someone who is subbing to you cannot you do not have power over them that they did not give you. As long as everyone's being respectful, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Um, or sometimes people mess up. But even with the situation with Leadhead, that is a perfect example to illustrate what you were saying, Sphere, in the sense that Leadhead was giving power away and not taking any of the power back when it was necessary. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I guess has to do with like submissive maturity, I suppose, in recognizing that you do have power. Because if you're getting into kink to escape your responsibilities or to cope with the fact that you don't have power in other spaces, that can end up hurting you, um, and leading you into rough situations. Thinking back to the what was it, the broken teacup that we read like last month, I think it was, or 2 months ago, of talking about how like protecting yourself or trying to figure out how to prevent uh, what may have made it easier to victimize you in the past is not the same as victim blaming, in the sense that just to exist is like a danger, right? Like even just going outside, I might get hit by a bus, but it doesn't mean that if I get hit by a bus, it's my fault, right? And in that sense, especially if you have lived um, assumed femme at the very least in society. Generally, something like watch your drinks is important. Not because if you get roofied, it's your fault, but because roofies do happen, and sometimes they're indiscriminate. And it's important to like try to take care of yourself, and just having blind faith that no one's ever gonna hurt you in the world is not very emotionally intelligent. Suffice to say. I have also considered a Seder Sona. We need more Seder Sonas, honestly. We remember fucking ourselves up mentally with a lot of LDR? LDR? What is LDR? And our fucking ourselves up was due to lack of experience. I think it's important to. That's why it's important for community. I don't think that like someone who's like on the internet being like, "Oh, I'm like some sort of like kangaroo or something," is necessarily the right place to go. Although I do think that like kink centered like content creators, people who talk about how to navigate BDSM are people to look at. But also like trying to find like groups in your area, not necessarily for group sets, but like in terms of like kink community. A lot of people assume that, and of course, most people here probably aren't assuming that because you know you have a little bit more experience and you've known other people to talk about it. But it's more than just like getting having sets or getting into sub or dom space. And community is important. Learning from other people, being community with people who you might or will never be in like a scene with or be in a relationship with is very important. And I think that's actually how kink society and kink community differs a lot from like the community of like vanilla sexual adults, in the sense that in like cis heteronormative like monogamous society, you're not really supposed to tell people about what you're doing. Like there's a expectation that like everything is like private. Um and especially with the weird dichotomy of men being assumed to be talking about past sexual exploits in a positive way, and that for it to be like some in some way degrading the value of a woman who is talked about, probably has a lot of probably creates a lot of tension there. But I think that even vanilla folk can learn a lot from kink community in the sense of, was it a problem halved is a problem shared? Even if you have a personal problem in your relationship, like going to like not even a group there like a couples therapist, but like couples like a group of couples talking about issues like a support group or something can be incredibly useful, and especially in a sense of having a community to go to when things are also going right is also really important. Being able to celebrate your successes and having like-minded people who share in experiences or values that can you can reflect on, and like refract from, I suppose, as well. I think these are all important aspects. Long distance relationship. Thank you. Gotcha. Almost all of our relationships are long distance. What's the difference between is a sorry, what's the difference between a long distance relationship and something else? Is like if you have a relationship with a headmate, is that like an ultra close distance relationship? Um, Going back to the Reddit post. Yeah, that sat really bad with my SO. She decided that DS relationships were wrong because they were teaching subs learned helplessness. That the reason why our friend was so messed up was because her previous master had messed with her through learned helplessness. Then she extended that to all sub dom activities are morally objectable due to ease of abuse. I don't know about our friend's case. I haven't had a chance to find out, but of the larger population, some people are just wired that way. Dom, sub, masochist, sadist, etc. Much like how people are sometimes wired to be gay, lesbian, queer, etc. I think this is true. There are people who literally cannot reach sexual gratification unless certain conditions are met. I mean, it just like be like having a fetish can be like that, you know? Paraphilia, that's the thing. Like a paraphilia is a non-standard like sexual interest, and although kink is something you can participate in, you can participate in kink without necessarily having a fetish for that thing or a kink for that thing, or even like an exclusive relationship with it. Like you can enjoy age play, but you don't have to only engage with age play just because you can only come in a diaper, for example. um and I think that it's important to recognize that there are literally people who can't reach climax if pain's not involved. Not me though. Never me. That could never be me. I'm like, actually, I'm gonna stop talking about that. However, I wanted to get outside opinions about both our positions. Is learning helplessness something that affects a sizable number of subs? Do you think that some people are just wired kinky? What do you think about it? Edit. I guess basically my stance is that you engage in DS play without running into that you can engage in DS play without running into that issue. While some instances of abuse may masquerade as BDSM, most instances of BDSM are not abusive. Proper consent and awareness prevent things from going so far as to cause learned helplessness. I feel like there are ways to navigate it that I don't think someone's automatically gonna run into learn helplessness just because they're in a sub dynamic. And if it's a healthy dynamic, then that generally should be able to be like worked with, like how with Leadhead's situation, uh, her partner literally like called her out, and she wanted to be called out, and she wanted to have that conversation, and that's important too. Close quarters combat, romantic variety. There's a post that there's an art that reminds me of that. I'll post it in the Discord later. Someone's gonna have to remind me though. Noodle, I choose you. Remind us of close quarters romantic variety combat later. Although it's probably what the thing I'm thinking of is more of a sexual variety, but still, because we'll post it later. It's like an enemies to lover thing. I've been DL for as long as I can remember, though I assume it was some magical event. Now I'm thinking of Magic the Gathering, like a Planeswalker spark, and it's just like, oh, diapers. I think learned helplessness can definitely be a risk for some kinds of play. I do not think that makes those kinds of play immoral. It's a risk that you need to be aware of and consent to, just like other risks from BDSM. Like Camera Gale said, losing a partner is always rough, and the more serious the relationship, the rougher it is. When you get used to seeing someone, having them by your side, making choices with them, it's hard to have to do things alone. Real. My close friend is going through a breakup right now, and she isn't doing the basic things she needs to take care of herself. It wasn't a DS relationship. She's just heartbroken, plain and simple. That's a risk of serious relationships. I absolutely believe some people are wired to be kinky because I know I am. I don't remember ever feeling differently. This isn't something anyone had to introduce me to. I have never felt learned helplessness, though, just as a function of who I am and the kind of play that I do. But I have been heartbroken. It sucks. Talking to friends helps a lot, though. Real. Let's see. This one I think was really we thought was really cool. For me personally, BDSM helped my feelings of learned helplessness because it put me in a position to be in control of my own control, especially as a switch. With consent of my partner, I was able to let go of the take on responsibility as necessary, and feeling as though that was within my capacity, extended to other parts of my life. Actually, that can be therapeutic. I think that that's really cool. And if you're being respected and you have a healthy dynamic, then knowing you can stop the scene at any time is like the important part. Actually, that was the thing that helped us understand the value and the how moral the consensual non-consent actually is, because from a more vanilla perspective, someone might say that that is not actual BDSM, but someone recklessly appropriating BDSM to cause abuse. But I mean, in my experience, and this is obviously it's not everyone, but in my experience, most people who want to do consensual non-consent play that I have met or been have had the pleasure of playing with were subs. I know that most people think of us as primarily a sub, but especially because of the learned helplessness we had and a lot of identity issues we had after our divorce or after the breakup that led to the divorce, um, we didn't we couldn't be a dom for a while. That's starting to change, or at least for some of us. Folks like Fantasia have been pretty good at still doming for a while. But other of us are still getting back into the swing of that headspace and that feeling, and also like being responsible for another person in that way. Uh, and it's pretty interesting. Um, but that is to say, there's a lot of people who, like ourselves, have been sexually assaulted, but do like consensual non-consent, and it's beyond just the a lot of people pick up fetishes and like paraphilias related to their trauma, but also the sense of like having control over a situation. And we consider like the bully fetish or bullying as a fetish to be a form of consensual non-consent, like something that has been something that we have had to get back used to, especially knowing that the partner that we play with is safe and like fully recognizing that. um in a really weird way, something that you're not supposed to do in relationships is test your partner, or in any sort of relationship, even a friend. You're not supposed to like test if they're a good friend, just like if you need something, ask for something. Like, don't try to like make arbitrary like fucking Hunger Games ass shit to prove that they're a good person or a good friend if they won't abuse you. That's fucked up. However, I do think that it was an interesting vector for like growth and trust and acceptance of being in a safe space. that we were in that we couldn't really settle ourselves into, in the fact that we could have a scene with our partner and be yelling no for like 30 straight minutes and be crying and wiggling and da, 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 da. And like from an outside perspective, maybe someone thought we were being abused. Don't know, don't care. But but my point is the power and the safety of being able to say no continuously, and the partner still is doing stuff to us and they automatically stop when we read that. I don't know what could bolster my trust in a person better without it being a near death experience. Um, it is a way to take back control of what happened to you. Not it doesn't work for everyone, but it helped us, or it helps us rather. I can relate to your friend, as I am struggling with a breakup at the moment. Losing someone, something who is important in your life, is rough on anyone. Kink is a means of feeling like you have some of that back, and the cravings become quite intense because they're also cravings for that person. Yeah, I think that's also important. I want to add to that because especially if you had a toxic or abusive dynamic and there was kink in it, like it becomes gray where the kink ends and the other stuff begins. Post relationship, we even had a partner like making fun of us and saying like shit that they wanted to upset us, and because they said it in a way that they had in the past when we were in the relationship had done like degradation play with us, it was hard for us not to be like to have a positive like reaction to it. And it was a weird experience. And sometimes your wires get crossed, like that's real too. So like even if the person that the OP knows was did pick up this this thing where she can't like get sexual gratification unless she is in physical pain, even if that did come from that relationship, like you kind of just learn to navigate it as best you can and try to heal and stuff. But you know, it does suck to not be able to retreat into that dynamic, because even if you're being abused, it's generally not like the worst 100% of the time. Whew. If someone ever kidnaps me and starts threatening me with torture, I'm just gonna pull a blitz and be like, "Oh, getting kinky." I have seen a bunch of like TikToks where it's just like the person who gets kidnapped is so into it that the person who kidnapped them lets them go. I always think that's pretty funny. 8 loyalty to gain an emblem with. Tap a diaper token to gain 3 arousal tokens. 8 loyalty to gain an emblem. Tap a diaper token to gain 3 arousal counters. Oh gosh. This is one of the best chats we've had in a while. What about NDEs? I can't even guess what that stands for right now. I'm sorry, Sonny. What's an NDE? We're almost at the end of our discussion. Damn, we hit the 3 hour mark. We're almost done. We're almost done, I think. I thought this is an interesting tidbit, especially because Leadhead talked about disassociation, and I thought we thought when we first saw the video that she talked about that she was saying that like Puppy Space was the exact same thing, but after the second view, we realized it was not they're the same thing, but they're intertwined, and I think that is correct. Um, Especially considering how we kind of do be an adult and a little at the same time and do that sort of shit. And as someone who definitely experiences disassociation, we pushed back this stream by like an hour because we were dissociating actually. Like there's definitely similarities and we can definitely attest to that, but there are differences as well. Is Subspace just erotic disassociation? I am a sub and absolutely love Subspace. Getting really deep into that trance like headspace where I feel everything and nothing, it's amazing. But I lately recognize that when my mental health isn't the best, I dissociate. It's not a good feeling, but I'm feeling similar effects as when I'm in Subspace. The whole out of body experience, amnesia, lightheaded, less pain feeling, etc. But without it being induced on purpose and or controlled. I wonder if subspace is a controlled and sexual disassociation. Does anyone else have this kind of feeling? I wonder if BDSM can help control the mental health issues by implementing the aftercare methods for a disassociation episode. Edit. The answers are fascinating. It looks like half the people agree that subspace feels like a positive disassociation, and the other half says it feels more like an orgasmic high. I was always interested in how different people experience their subspace, but it's obviously very hard to compare. I love reading all these answers. This is super interesting. Thanks everyone that answered so far. Yeah, that's pretty nice. It's really interesting hearing people be like an orgasmic high, especially because like you can enter subspace without ever coming. Near death experiences. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Near death experiences. We have trauma bonded with people through near death experiences actually. And if you live and like hang out with a person enough, it can happen. Um, what was it? There's also like what was it? I think it was called like the drawbridge effect or the suspension bridge effect, where like there's a heightened feeling of connection between people who are in not an who are in a like a thrilling situation but not an altogether dangerous one. Like getting on like which one is it? A carousel is the one that goes horizontally, and the merry-go-round is the one that goes vertically, right? So if like if you're afraid of heights or something, and you go on a date and you get on like a big Ferris wheel, like there is you might experience a suspension bridge effect that induced fear can create a connection with the person that you're with or a desire to like cuddle with them and stuff. Speaking of NDEs, I'm kind of wanting to watch the OA again. It's all about near death experiences. Okay, so we'll just read a few of these. Let's see. I've often wondered that as well. I feel in a similar state when in subspace and when I'm disassociating, except the one major difference is that when I'm disassociating, it's a negative state of mind, and when I'm in subspace, it's an almost euphoric feeling. I really agree with your idea of using similar aftercare you would after a scene after a dissociative episode, as the come down can be similar. Oh, definitely, definitely. This is interesting. Um, we don't always see we often don't see disassociation as negative necessarily. A lot of our disassociation we view as more on the neutral side, though plenty of it happens under negative stimuli and it is unwanted, so it can definitely have negative effects on us, but it's not always as simple as, oh, if I'm disassociating it's bad. I disassociate during sets and or kink. It's not the same to me personally. When I am in subspace, it feels like my world has been melted away to just between me and my doms. It feels like my identity has centralized on the submissive part of me. Disassociation, on the other hand, feels like I am disconnected from the world and or myself. Derealization is when you are disconnected from your surroundings, which to me feels like everything is distant and confusing. Depersonalization causes you to forget aspects of myself. Causes me to forget aspects of myself. With subspace, everything is still there. It's just hyper focused on specific attributes of the world or myself. It's not that I forget my name during subspace, it's just not important anymore. It's not like the world is gone, it's just not my viewpoint at the time. For reference, I have DID, which is a fairly complex dissociative disorder, and I've been in therapy for a few years. I will say aftercare and the structure of BDSM have been helpful for my disassociation somewhat, but I wouldn't say subspace and dissociation are the same. And I think this is the last one I'll read from here. The problem with the word dissociation is there's like four social definitions depending on the context. It can cause a lot of trouble even in psychology circles, and as someone with a dissociative disorder, it makes discussion about it really difficult. In this case, what you're describing is actually closer to derealization, out of body, less pain, lightheaded. But some dissociative or depersonalized properties, amnesia, depending on what it's about. And no, it's not derealization for everyone or even necessarily most. Not all subs describe an out of body experience. I can attest when we bottom, we don't generally have an out of body experience. Sick. Um, and was it? So the personal theory is that it's both functionally an emotional flashback and also in some ways memory recovery, reconnecting to a potentially traumatic time frame or a time of neglect, whether that can be neglect of attention or neglect of emotional support. Part of PTSD recovery is being able to reconnect with those memories, pull them out of a safe and controlled manner, and try to add some care and current understanding to them and put them back. It's psychologically extremely interesting for a reason, you know. Oh, I definitely like what was this Dear Hobbies is putting down here, especially in that sense of like talking about the PTSD recovery, because in terms of having an out of body experience, generally folks who have had traumatic experiences, especially that have PTSD, especially if you are prone to flashbacks, even though flashbacks are generally like you're there again, recalling the memory can often have the visceral sensation of you being outside of yourself in the third person. Though we feel much more comfortable looking at ourselves in the third person than in the first person. Part of the reason why we like third person video games over first person video games. But like, it's once we realize that a lot of traumatic experiences, when reflected upon, are reflected upon in the third person, and that a lot of like therapy and trauma recovery um, isn't necessarily focused on the end result, but tends to result in the integration of the memory in a way where you can experience it firsthand and you don't feel like you're viscerally experiencing it every time you access it, I think is really interesting. Because we used to view it as, oh, if I regularly experience a memory in first person after generally experiencing it in third person, that means I'm trauma recovering. Not necessarily the case. Near death experience as a kink, that's a hard one. And that's like so close to snuff. It's like proto snuff. Finally, just because BDSM can have a therapeutic effect doesn't mean it will necessarily be effective in reprocessing. BDSM can be a coping mechanism in itself, and not always the most healthy of ones. Yeah, there's a lot of variables there. And again, the links are in the description for the YouTube channel, so if you want to look back at any of this stuff or read more, it's there. Whew. Subspace. You could be in danger while in top slash subspace. Learn how to protect yourself. This is a more straightforward, like article about like safety and BDSM. Well, let's navigate a little bit. Exploring kink is full of exciting experiences and hormonal roller coasters. We manipulate adrenaline and endorphins to give us a pleasurable experience during play, also without knowing how these hormones will impact us after the play is over. It is the high we are after, aren't we? So if I told you the impaired judgment, the slow verbal responses, the sweats or shakes, and the sluggish behavior can be dangerous to your health and others if you don't know how to deal with it, these warning labels aren't just for alcohol and prescription drugs. Yeah, I'm definitely not into near death experiences. Though the after it's we've had a couple of near death experiences, and the relief that comes with after that is like almost euphoric. But it's definitely not something I am willing to chase. Although I guess technically like just being into like extreme sports like how we longboard and stuff is kind of related. I mean shit, we almost got hit by a car skating today. It didn't really emotionally disturb us either. It was like, well, I could have died, but I didn't. We are junkies. Adrenaline and endorphins are our body's natural uppers. They make us feel good, and we can crave them, get hooked, and addicted to the feeling. Adrenaline junkies are not a myth. Just because your drug of choice is a flogger and a willing bottom doesn't mean you are immune. Bombs are worse offenders since we often are on the receiving end of an endorphin high that can bring us to a state where we cannot communicate, cannot function well, and oftentimes are at the hands of a top while all this happens. Bottoms aren't the only ones affected. Tops also experience a high where they zone out those around them and have a hyper awareness of the bottom and the activity they're engaged in. A high top, high top, a high top may not hear safe words or see the early responses of a bottom that a play is getting too intense and back off. They just want more, feed off the play, and forget their inner dungeon monitor. I think that it's kind of nice that they recognize that someone can lapse in being the best at consent and it not being like them being necessarily evil. But it is something that they're responsible for and should manage. No, no, I'm not into snuff. I'm not into snuff. I might be in something snuff adjacent though. It's scary that we sometimes walk into situations without knowing how our bodies are going to react, not only during, but after the scene has ended. Read the label and then read yourself. Back to those pesky labels again. Almost anyone can quote what you know is there. Don't operate heavy machinery until you know how this drug will affect you. Play the same way play is the same way and should be treated the same. Some play is more intense than others and could have a stronger effect. Read the signs that you are in an altered state. Did you have increased pain tolerance above and beyond what you normally have? Do you feel slow or sluggish in your movements? Are you feeling hyper aware of yourself, but the rest of the room fades away? Are you extra cold or hot? Is your body trembling? Do you feel excessively tired? Heart racing? Crying or laughing for no reason? Feeling needy, sad, or confused? Experience euphoria. You could be experiencing a hormone high. Take a break. Immediately after play is not the time to climb into your car and drive home. You need to calm down. You need to normalize the hormones and emotions going on. For your safety and for those around you, make time in your schedule just to be. Sit and relax somewhere. Get a nap if you need it, and rehydrate before you consider heading home. If you're at a public play party, the dungeon monitors are very likely going to ask you to stay a while after the play if they see you packing up to leave. They watch your safety during play and want to take care of you after as well. Listen to them. 5 to 10 minutes is not too much of a sacrifice for a safe trip home. Learn your body's responses to adrenaline and endorphins so that you can tell your play partner also. Aftercare is one of the ways you can help come down after play. It's not just for bombs either. Negotiate before play, and if the play partner doesn't want to give it, but you need it, then find a surrogate that will. Staying safe is knowing how you'll react to all the BDSM offers and then protecting yourself as much as possible from the risks. Know yourself and please stay out of the driver's seat if you are high. That's cute. I'm not trying to belittle the article at all. It's interesting to talk about it in the sense of like drugs and stuff. And I think it's valuable in the sense that, in the same way that consent can be skewed when your ability to consent can be reduced or like be non-existent if you're a certain amount of intoxicated. There's a certain amount of come down that is, I think, important to like consensual moral play before you continue playing again. Because if someone is in a subspace or in a dom space, or heaven forbid both partners are in the space that they that acquiesce to their role, then they might go over each other's or their selves or both limits. And sometimes that might not even be the person's personal limit. Maybe it'll be a physical limit. Like not having your pain tolerance reduced during a spanking might make it so that you don't red even when you should for your physical safety, or at the very least to not have like a literally bleeding bottom. Um, so I think keeping that in mind also adds even more context to the Leadhead video, especially with that sort of without that clear separation. If you're not regularly getting into scenes with your partner, I would say that it is even more important to be going over your dynamic and what you expect and stuff regularly, or if any hiccups happen, especially if they aren't big hiccups, it's important to, in a timely manner, mention them so you can even out the wrinkles, even if it wasn't, say, a consent violation or anything like that. Because being able to talk after play or between scenes is really important, and there's much more of an ability if you are having like more traditional scenes to be like, okay, we just did the scene, we just did the aftercare, let's talk about it. Or the setup and the like negotiation beforehand, you already have that you can already generally have that framework. But if you have a 24/7 dynamic, then you might not necessarily have that framework, or your framework may be a lot more loose. And in that case, before you enter a dynamic with someone, you should discuss what you want, or at the very least, as you're trying to iron it out. Because especially in a new relationship, especially a new relationship that has like a big kink component, that like roller coaster of emotions and like the honeymoon phase still affects people, right? So sometimes you won't talk about everything you need to talk about until it comes up, and that happens, and that doesn't make anyone like bad at kink necessarily, but it is something to recognize. And especially as you get into more relationships, it makes sense that you would develop like experience with yourself. At the very least, you come into new relationships or additional relationships with the ability to like vocalize your needs and your limits, and hopefully your partner will too. Not to say that like finding someone and like being a play partner or being in a dynamic with someone who's new to it isn't okay. It is, but folks should be patient and not try to rush into things too quickly. Gosh, there's a lot of I'm giving a lot of kink advice today. Gonna drip out for a bit. Love you and wish y'all the best with attempting to be immune to the brain goo. I'm not immune to any brain goo, but thank you. Have a good one, Noodle. Thanks for stopping by. All right, last article. We we finally made it. It's the last one, and I think it's the longest one too. How Subspace can help us better understand consent. See, we made it full circle. I love this picture, by the way. It's great. Those in the BDSM community often say they understand consent more than most people because they regularly discuss it. That's definitely true. But what's also true is that a sub often enters a heightened erotic state called subspace, which can easily blur all of the lines. For instance, I know a dominant submissive who would agree that there would be no penetrative sex during their BDSM play when she had entered a subspace, though she was so lost in her transcendental state that she wanted to have sex. He had to use their safe word in order to enforce their boundaries and stop the play before it went too far. That's a really I haven't really heard of that happening in a scene before, but that is actually a good point. You can, I mean, obviously I shouldn't always assume that people are in the same understanding of like kink stuff, but it is generally understood in the kink community that anyone can like the tops and doms have needs too, right? Um, and that like top space can be just as disorienting or like compromising as subspace, you know, and that it is totally okay for a top or a dom to safe word out. But I have not very often heard of a situation where a top safe worded out of a scene specifically because they knew that what their sub was begging for was something that if they were not in subspace they would not be begging for. And I think that that's also what's so valuable about like the trust part of any sort of like BDSM or kink influence relationship, Because if you're one, if your partner doesn't understand your boundaries, and two, if your partner understands your boundaries and willingly takes advantage of you, knowing that you said yes in this situation, that's fucked up, and that can really fuck up your relationship with intimacy, let alone BDSM. And I think that it's cool that so early in this article, um, the fact that a sub and a dom are equal was also kind of invoked. As a sex researcher, I've rarely seen a deep dive into what subspace actually is, how a person gets there, and how healthy or unhealthy it is for a person's mental well being. Yet, it's a concept that fascinates me. Ever since I started engaging in and researching kink, the altered state of mind associated with the subspace has fascinated me. On a personal level, it's a peaceful tranquility that someone like me, who has a near crippling type A personality, rarely gets to experience. You might be thinking, what the hell is subspace? Great, another esoteric term to learn. Stick with me because I promise it's super interesting. Even more importantly, understanding the concept can help everyone appreciate the importance of sexual boundaries, whether they're full blown kinksters, they simply indulge in a little light spanking or fetish play every now and then, or they're only into vanilla sets. Let's dig more deeply into the whole concept of subspace. We've already talked about what subspace is. Yeah. What causes someone to get into subspace? In a word, hormones. Intense sex play, even if it's consensual, may be interpreted by the sympathetic nervous system, which detects pain as a threat. That signals the brain to activate a fight or flight response, causing the body to release stress hormones like epinephrine and cortisol. Wow, I know how to pronounce that. Didn't know that. A chain reaction follows. Increased cortisol levels induce release of more hormones like endorphins and I don't know this one. And enkephalins, which are natural chemicals that can boost pain tolerance while increasing the pleasurable, floaty feelings of euphoria. The parasympathetic nervous system is also activated, creating relaxed and calm feelings in the brain and throughout the body. When the scene ends, hormones drop. That can cause a subspace to turn into a somewhat shocking sub drop, in which the submissive is not only exhausted, but also hot, cold, hungry, even disoriented for a brief time. A caring dom will provide whatever aftercare is needed during the several hours after a scene. Some people actually bounce back pretty quickly, but you shouldn't assume that someone will just because you tend to, you know? Why subs love being in subspace? For me, submissive, subspace is the ultimate goal in the BDSM scene. The state of mind can provide such profound release that they feel they're temporarily leaving all of their troubles behind. I'm thinking of the South Park intro now. Mentally, there's healing that comes from finding this space where your problems melt away and you're forced to focus on the pleasures and pains your body is experiencing, says Daniel Sanat, a sex educator and co founder of Not Safe for Work, a BDSM focused members club. By incorporating blindfolds or other sensory deprivation tools, Subspace can give you a moment to just breathe and calm your mind. Schaefer explains that having positive experience with Subspace can help people develop deeper bonds with partners and work through any trust issues they may have. People who enter Subspace and come out the other side can see how they can trust someone else to care for their needs and help keep them safe during an intense situation, as well as developing an appreciation for how resilient they are on their own, she says. Can Doms enjoy Subspace? Many do. During a scene, of course, Doms are in are in charge of what's happening. During play, they may enter their own top space, in which they fully enjoy the power, control, and connection with their sub who is in their subspace. It doesn't provide the same type of euphoria, but it can be extremely pleasurable. Why boundaries matter when it comes to subspace. As Schaefer points out, subspace puts a submissive into a state of high suggestibility, during which they lose full control of their mental function. That's precisely the appeal. The possibility of entering subspace sets the stage for Doms to be completely trusted with responsibility for a sub's well being. After all, in subspace, the submissive may have trouble making informed decisions about issues like penetrative sex or the length of a punishment session. It's the Dom's responsibility to care for the sub in their desired way. If you're playing a BDSM session, it's very important to set your boundaries. While in subspace, you may want to ignore these boundaries, so having a respectful partner is important. Having these conversations before sex to ensure consent is always first of mind, even when you're in subspace, says Sant. And needless to say, it's even more important to set boundaries well ahead of time when partners are, for example, having their first in person encounter after meeting on FetLife, or if play involves a sadistic Dom and or a submissive who are into masochism. Real. Um, we learned uh, in a hard-ish but not completely hard way about this when we did a pick up and play session with a couple when we were first getting into the scene during like a ADBL play party, and they like put us on like one of those triangle things and like fully attached we even had like a collar with a D ring was connected to it, so we couldn't very much raise our heads. And they gagged us and like did stuff, and we wanted to leave the session before they did. And on top of that, they had like a kind of a conflict with each other, or like had some like trouble they need to talk through during the singing, and we're just left on the side fucking gagged and bound and just like guys. And I don't want to say it's a boundary violation, but it was also on all of us to have discussed that beforehand and have some way for us to like safe word out, which is also how we ended up developing the three tap thing that we do with partners now. Anyone we play with, we establish the three tap rules of like as if it's like wrestling or whatever. Three taps means like whatever you're currently doing, please stop or check in or something, you know? Um, it does sometimes depend on the context. Like three taps might mean I can't breathe. Three taps might mean I'm having a panic attack. You don't know necessarily the level when it's nonverbal, but it's important to have some way to communicate. And I'm glad that happened early on in our BDSM journey because holy shit, we don't consider it to have been like a consent violation, like I said, but it was definitely traumatic. I've had to exit a scene as a Dom because my sub was asking for things that were normally outside of their boundaries and not pre negotiated that. Also, as a Dom, being cruel or violent might feel good in the scene, but afterwards you have to confront that you feel good from being what society calls a monster. Subs, please reach out to your Doms to see if they need aftercare in the days after. I would say that, especially as someone who has been on both sides of the dynamic, it's really important, and I think that after I think that it is super healthy and worthwhile to pursue having a relationship where after the sub gets aftercare, that the sub gives aftercare to the dom. I want to throw things at you so bad. Sorry, I just had a crocodile sneaking past our desk. Anyway, yeah, I think that that's really valuable. Thanks, Sphere. Really, really enjoy your contributions to stream today. This has been excellent. Um, and I think that there's a certain type of love and care that really gets my goat in the sense of like having a partner that's recognizing that you are going beyond your own boundaries and then looking out for you and making sure you don't, you know? In that same sense, like especially if you're like a sadist, like you can enjoy being cruel and like being brought down to earth and stuff. And recognizing that is important, even if you don't necessarily have like a feeling of I feel like a bad person. Though we know folks that really struggle with like doing like impact play or anything that causes pain to a partner. Um, shit, like the look on someone's face when you first tell them to choke you, for example, can tell you all you need to know about their like their disposition about it. Not necessarily that doesn't take the place of negotiation, is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, depending on the face they make or their immediate reaction, I can probably tell you how open they'll be initially to it at the very least, because some people just cannot like that emotional strain. They can't decompartmentalize that well, and I think that that's something that also affects people who aren't like necessarily into BSM, or how people judge others' morality that do stuff that they don't find hot or like into. Um, Kind of like that other Reddit post we saw where someone's partner saw how one person like had her experience of sexual arousal intrinsically connected to pain, and being like, oh, this must be as a result of something fucked up that happened to you, and thinking of that state as something that is not good to be in. Um, I mean, in the same way, there are people who assume that if you're a masochist, that you have like Stockholm syndrome. Uh, Hot take: Stockholm syndrome doesn't exist and was a way for the government to basically, basically infantilize people who were more the victims of the police than of the people who took them hostage way back when. Anyway, let's finish. The difference between subspace and a dissociative mental state. This is why we left this one for last. The responsibility a Dom has for their sub goes beyond subspace. Lola Jean tells me that subspace and dissociation can appear similar in the physiological responses they create: closed eyes, non responsive, dreamlike. Dissociation occurs when the body causes the mind to completely black out what's happening. Because the two states look similar, it's critical for Doms and subs to get to know each other, their boundaries, and their reactions to certain stimuli. I I would love to look more into, although we won't have time today. Where is it? Dissociation occurs when the body causes the mind to completely black out what's happening. I don't experience it like that necessarily. Sometimes it is, but we can be disassociating and also be sort of aware of what's happening. Like, we could be aware we're staring into space. We even say to ourselves, damn, I'm disassociating. But like, we could be aware of it. And we don't always lose time when we disassociate. Government grade gaslighting. I like that. I like that. I mean, I don't like. I like the word. It's funny. Because the two states look similar, it's critical for Doms and subs to get to know each other, their boundaries, and their reactions to certain stimuli. If your submissive becomes non responsive or displays incoherence in any manner, it's a good idea to halt what you're doing and begin grounding exercises. Lola Jean explains. Ground them by bringing attention to each of their senses. Bring awareness to touch, sound, and smell. Assuming you have taken the time to understand what type of aftercare they respond best to, you can apply that there as well. I think this is really cool. And although the blissed out state is like, I would feel like the blissed out state that is associated with subspace is kind of like, also euphoria and stuff, and on the way up you might not necessarily be in subspace, right? Like, you do have to work your way up to it. Or sometimes it's a trigger. Like, if you have an association with like being called a certain thing that only your partner calls you, and you come home and you get called that, the weight of responsibilities might happen and you might just revert to a puppy, right? But like, I think how you get there is very interesting. And for people who compare to dissociation, especially people who don't experience dissociation outside of like these type of dynamics, I find it interesting their perspective on things, because there's a lot of differences between dissociation and like the alternate consciousness of like sub or dom space, and how someone talked about their experience of being like hyper focused on the thing shows like that there's a difference, because, or sorry, there can be differences, because some people mostly bliss out, other folks don't, and it can also run like a in a gray area. Like, a lot of times we won't get necessarily nonverbal, but we might get semi-verbal. or like in being little we might have like a reduced vocabulary. um and it's just interesting to me hearing someone be like, oh yeah, subspace is the same as dissociation, right? When it's like a lot of people's feelings of dissociation include not being able to feel things, whereas like I don't know, when I'm in subspace, like I can feel everything. It's like all my pores are opened up. Or like when you plug your nose and then you like shut your mouth and blow to open up your ears, it's like that's my entire body. RE time stuff. In subspace, time is wobbly, but it's nothing like the lost time of dissociation. Real! And honestly, doing this research actually helped me figure out the difference between it and to value being able to feel and sense things and even have like tunnel vision sometimes, because being able to experience things instead of being like phased out of things is nice, even though sometimes you just don't want to exist. Um, Both mental states can be disorienting to calm down from, so it's the dom's responsibility to care for the sub in an appropriate way. This aftercare should also be discussed in advance. How subspace can deepen our understanding of consent. That's actually the title of this article. Don't know what that is too. Let's block this element just in case. Thank you. It's not just an issue in BDSM. Even when you're in a heightened while subspace may sound like a total foreign concept to someone outside of the kink community, it sheds light on the importance of consent in all types of sexual relationships. Both consent and boundaries should be discussed beforehand, not figured out or ignored in the heat of the moment. It's not just an issue of BDSM. Even when you're in a heightened orgasmic state while during vanilla sets, you may ask for something or give into an activity that you'll later regret. Both partners must be respectful of the other's boundaries. For example, whenever someone says, I don't want to have intercourse or I don't want to be whipped, these activities shouldn't be pushed or suggested in the heat of the session. Boundaries are boundaries. We need to learn how to set them, accept them, and respect them. Yeah. Yeah, and respecting someone else's boundaries, even when they are quote unquote giving you a free pass, I think really shows maturity and compassion. It's super hot. Woo! We read all the thingies. Can't you believe it? We're so good at reading, everybody. Oh shit! Wow. Ugh. Like in subspace moments can feel long or short. The movement from moment to moment can feel fuzzy. But in dissociation, in the shower, for example, one moment the water is running hot and the nets is cold, and all the moments in between are missing. I think that's a good way to put it. And everyone experiences some a level of dissociation, like was a highway hypnosis or whatever, or not remembering your whole commute to work or whatever. Like there are times where our brain just doesn't need to store all those memories and be like paying attention to anything other than we don't need to be paying attention necessarily to the passage of time. Sometimes we just need to make sure we're not missing our train stop, or focus on driving and nothing else. Sometimes shit is just automatic. We forgot our oatmeal. Oh shit. Sonny forgot its antidepressant oatmeal. I don't really think I have anything post post articles to say. I feel like I editorialized the shit out of everything we covered. So I feel pretty good at ending here, but I want to give a chance to for anyone to ask questions, questions or comments based on anything we talked about before we go on break and stuff, because that's chill. If we had more time, we would have totally made this a fucking PowerPoint presentation. By the way, oh yeah, I should probably eat too. Yeah, actually, I just realized I'm hungry. I was so excited and invested in what we were doing on stream that I totally had compartmentalized it. Sick. I still didn't finish my marble drink. Y'all would hate Beltro. Way too many straights. Oh gosh, we're really bad at poker. I think. We have a friend who really wants us to play Beltro, and we do like roguelikes. Though I don't know if we will enjoy a poker roguelike. Maybe, maybe. We're kind of into stuff. We used to be completely desensitized to death a few years ago. Oh gosh, I'm having a '90s moment thinking about what was it? Not Subspace. There was a site called Rotten.com that like if ever we were in like a computer lab or like at school on computers in like middle school and high school, um it was one of the dozens of sites that our peers would like try to get on, especially if they found a way around like the like extreme content blocks. And chicken, chicken, chicken. Ah, thank you for chicken, big sis.
Oh, wow. You're welcome for chicken, little fish.
I love that. Oh my god. Yeah. Friday chicken.
Friday chicken.
Chicken
Chicken Friday.
Friday. We do not recommend being desensitized to death. That's fair. Uh, I take a little bit of a little bit of desensitization as a treat, especially considering the world we live in right now. I mean, it was always weird to us to hear other black people talk about like after like someone getting murdered or like killed by police or whatever, where it's like, oh yeah, it doesn't it hurts, but like I'm not like overly affected by it anymore. It's just life, and I see it all the time, and that's part of my existence. It's kind of like that. I'm also like that about queer shit. So like, I don't think you should be completely desensitized, but I do think you should at least be able to compartmentalize, which are different things. But sometimes you just gotta be desensitized for a while. You can resensitize yourself, but it can be difficult. And we do live in a culturally, uh, like our culture is very desensitized to violence in particular, especially in America. So that's valid as hell.
As he says, down with culture.
As he says, down with culture. Remember, kids, if you spend your free time going online and looking at rotten corpses, try getting a medical degree. God, you're weird. I love all of you. Man, every time I visit your country, it's a nightmare. As it should be. Did you just throw your pants at me? Or are these our pants? I think these are our pants. Relax straight? I should burn these. I can't believe we have straight pants. Christ. I'm just not used to how violent everything is. Really? I I don't know. I'm so American. I mean, like there's like gun worship and stuff like that. Um and we do have a bit of a military fetish ourselves. So like we're certainly not immune to it. Um but yeah. It is huh. Military fetishism and snuff probably goes well together. Enjoy oatmeal time, Sonny, and we will enjoy our chicken time. We're gonna take a breaky break, but thanks for watching, especially anyone who actually was here for the entire discussion section. Holy shit, we're almost at 4 hours, so this is a long. Those will be a long discussion VOD. We'll probably upload it like in a couple of days. Well, I mean, sort of anyone can have a gun. Like, yes and no. Any white person can have a gun. Let me put it like that. even though like there's illegal guns and stuff and gangs and stuff, the availability of guns to the quote unquote average person in America is actually like legally very high. But a lot of people do not have access to it. Just a lot of people with capital, and it is sucky, especially if you come from a place like Canada or like say Japan, where gun regulation is really strict. Like, it'll get worse every day. Don't hug me, I'm scared. Real. Okay, I'm gonna stay here chatting and not eat if I don't hurry up. Uh, I have a Midwestern goodbye sort of feeling right now.